Continuing.
I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Anchorage Assembly to order. Please begin with a roll call. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Starr. Here. Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Ms. Demboski.
Here.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Honored to be here.
Mr. Flynn.
Present.
Mr. Trainee.
Here.
Mr. Evans.
Here.
Mr. Keel.
Here.
Ms. Johnston. Here. Mr. Honeman.
Here.
Mr. Hall.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ms. Johnston, would you kindly lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of quick things. Over the weekend, Saturday, the Centennial co-sponsored the Unity Gala, which was co-hosted by Bridge Builders, and I think almost 500 people attended, with representing all the diverse communities in Anchorage, and really a tremendous event showcasing, the complexity of Anchorage, and at the same time, everybody under the common theme of unified to have a great city. So it was a great event. The next event coming up under the Centennial banner, and you're of course all invited, and I hope you'll get tickets, is the film premiere of the movie of Anchorage, which is being produced by John Larson of Dateline fame. John was the news director at Channel 2 many years ago and went on to be an Emmy Award-winning journalist with Dateline, and he's co-producing the film of literally the history of Anchorage told through a different viewpoint. It's not just a linear history, it's told through many different voices, and it's going to be at the PAC on September 13th, so you can get tickets at CenterTix, and we hope that you'll all attend, because it's our city, and we want to make sure that our leaders are well represented there. CFO Mahoney and I will be leaving next week for a couple of days to go to New York to sell bonds. As you know, we'll be meeting with our bond rating agencies to see if we can maintain, and we're confident we can, our AAA bond rating. And we'll also be meeting with some of the different financial institutions that typically buy bonds. So we're confident that the bond sales will go very well and very quickly, because Anchorage bonds, quite frankly, are in great demand. So we look forward to a very successful trip, and I'll report when next meeting how it all goes. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things for the Chair's report. First, we have an AMATS meeting for the Policy Committee on Thursday. I believe Mr. Steele and Mr. Peterson will be joining the Mayor and I there. And then just for the information of those present, I've heard from the East Side representatives, they have asked that we postpone item 14A for at least 4 weeks and perhaps 6, so that the Northeast Community Council can weigh the consistency of this proposal with the East Side District Plan and the Comprehensive Plan. So no surprises, hopefully, for when that comes up. Other than that, let's go to committee reports. Let's start with you, Mr. Starr.
No report.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No report this evening.
Ms. Demboski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no report, but I have one disclosure. Item 9 Echo 3, within the awards, there is an appropriation for AFD, an award for AFD for examination gloves. Though my husband's a fireman, I don't think I have a conflict, so I would ask that I could participate on that item.
Do you own the company selling us the gloves?
He wears them. He does wear them, I'm sure.
We'll let that one slide. You'll be compelled to participate, Ms. Demboski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Budget and Finance Committee met on Thursday, August 21st, and the CFO provided a brief 2015 budget update. She mentioned a potential shortfall between $4 and $6 million. Some departments are proposing increases, and others are providing the requested 1% reduction. The reductions that are needed to manage the anticipated shortfall should occur, with some departments making more reductions than others. Departments have been requested to encumber known 2014 expenses. The CFO also provided an overview of the revenue status report as of August 13, and these reports are in your agenda packets. One of the things she mentioned, which I think is absolutely wonderful, is that there's been a growth in tourism reflected in the room rental and vehicle rental tax. The projected increase was 4%, but the actual increase is 8%. One other point of interest was, as you all remember, we approved increases in transit fares, and we also heard from the public when we were about to do that, who were just fine with that, different segments of the public. But she also reported that the ridership decreased by 5%. She also reported that the city anticipates receiving $1.2 million in the claim for the tobacco tax smuggling trial, which I think we all remember, but that's not going to happen until 2015. The CFO provided a brief summary of 2014 budgets to actual by department, which is also in your packet. The CFO also informed the committee that AR 2014-221, the proposed change in the fund balance policy, that's also in your packet, and she said that it has been recommended by our financial advisors that this occur. The committee work plan for the committee, it includes maintaining a working relationship with the Budget Advisory Commission, and we were fortunate to have the chair of the Budget Advisory Commission attend the meeting, and she provided an overview of the BAC's work. She also discussed part of what they like to do, and it's review departments to find savings, and this is another action plan within the Budget and Finance Committee's work plan. The departments that she identified that the BAC have been asked to look at the request of Ms. Johnson, are Public Works, Parks and Recreation, AWW, IT, and Finance. The chair or representative of the Budget Advisory Commission will be attending our monthly committee meetings, and the chair or representative of the Budget Finance Committee will also attend the BAC committee meetings. The committee informally accepted the proposed work plan, and our next meeting is September 18th. The committee work plan remains under review by the committee, and we, as I mentioned, informally accepted it. Our next meeting is September 21st. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like a point of personal privilege. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce, and I hope I'm not going to embarrass you, Patricia, but I have the good fortune of working with a social work student from UAA, and she's doing her practicum with me, and we're going to be working together 16 hours a week, and I'm just so honored to do this. And I'd like to introduce Patricia Chapman. Patricia, stand up, please, and say hello to everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. I think Ms. Johnston has a question for you. Ms. Johnston?
Yes, I just clarification as far as my request to the BAC chair. I suggested that she might look at those departments because they all came in under budget last year, and just to analyze the culture and how they came in under budget, and see if there's some things that we can use from those departments for other departments to use.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Mr. Traney?
Nothing, sir.
Mr. Evans?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We had the first meeting of our ad hoc committee on chronic inebriates and the homeless on August 14th. We worked on a work plan that gives us sort of a guideline for how to go forward. We're still working on refining that. It was very clear from that meeting that success in this endeavor is going to require a lot of partners to work with the committee. We've been reaching out to various organizations and entities that are natural fits for that partnership. And we've been receiving a lot of voluntary messages from other folks in town who want to be part of that project. So it's very encouraging. I just urge that everyone have patience with us. It's more important that we get this right than we do it fast. And given how many people really need to be involved to make that successful, it's going to take a bit of time to get our legs under us and get that organization or that committee up and running. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. I have heard quite a bit of feedback as well. Apparently, the committee was a topic of discussion at the Aquila House board meeting today. So my thanks to you and to Mr. Peterson, Ms. Domboski, and Ms. Gray Jackson for your participation on that committee. Mr. Steele.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Johnston.
Yes. On Thursday at 11:30, we'll have an Enterprise Committee meeting. This will be our somewhat monthly. We're a little longer this time for MLNP and the port as far as updates on their projects. And we were going to have a report from the CFO as far as different financing tools, but I think she's going to be in New York, so we'll do that another time. On September 8th at 11:30, we'll be having a Title 21 meeting, and this one, we'll be discussing different tax abatements or tools that can be used within the municipality to encourage residential development. And then on October 3rd, we will be having a joint meeting in Girdwood with the Assembly and with the municipal manager. This is tentative, but it's firming up pretty quickly, and the clerk is right on top of it. And Mr. Evans and I will be the cooks.
That's a good straight line, Ms. Johnston, but I'm not going to use it. Mr. Honeman.
Just a question, Mr. Johnson, is that with the Girdwood Board of Supervisors meeting? Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Public Safety Committee meeting met August 20th, a very good meeting, and not to recapitulate a lot of the details, but we did discuss how perhaps our public safety entities would respond to an event, public civil demonstration or disorder as the likes we've been seeing in the lower 48. And I'm happy, and you'll be happy to note that there are certainly plans that works. The chief will likely come forward at some point and discuss that. We'll have some informational meetings and to the media, and especially to let them know that we're not. There's a lot of equipment that are concerned in around the country, law enforcement, and we don't have a lot of that equipment, but we are prepared and certainly have faced some demonstrations in the past, but nothing to the likes we've been seeing in the lower 48. The other thing is we'll have a Public Safety Committee meeting for September 17th at noon, conference room here between our Assembly Chambers and the Wilda Marston Theater. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ethics and Elections Committee meeting tomorrow, 12 noon, City Hall, room 150.
You mean 155, right?
Pardon?
155?
No, it's actually on 150.
Oh, I'll be darned. All right.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to your progress. Okay. That brings us to the consent agenda. First, I need a motion to incorporate the addendum, please.
Move to incorporate the addendum to the agenda. Second.
We'll do a quick reading here. The addendum is item 9, Bravo 5. AR 2014-225, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating area-wide Fund 101 fund balance in the amount of $42,000 to the Employee Relations Department, area-wide Fund 101, and $57,000 to the Finance Department, area-wide Fund 101, to support day-to-day operations and provide additional capacity for the SAP implementation from the Office of Management and Budget. It's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 510-2014. Item 9C, Charlie 2, AM 511-2014, recommendation of award to Ocean Terminals Incorporated to furnish chlorine to the Asplund Wastewater Treatment Facility for the Municipality of Anchorage, Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility, ITB 2014-B046, in the amount of $887,220 from the Purchasing Department. Item 9C3, AM 512-2014, recommendation of award to Annette's Trucking for 2014 Foothills East Subdivision Area Street Reconstruction for the Municipality of Anchorage, Public Works Department, Project Management and Engineering, ITB 2014-C060, in the amount of $2,287,672, also from the Purchasing Department. Item 9D Delta 13, AM 513-2014, proprietary purchase of computer software licensing and maintenance support for the Justice Web Module from New Dawn Technologies for the Municipality of Anchorage Law Department in the amount of $56,440 from the Purchasing Department. 9D Delta 14, AM 514-2014, sole source purchase with SHI International Incorporated to replace the current disaster recovery software for the Municipality of Anchorage from APD in the amount of $95,488.06, also from the Purchasing Department. 9D Delta 15, AM 515-2014, change order number 2 to purchase order 2014-4033 with eDocs Alaska to implement shop order workflow and Laserfiche forms module for the Municipality of Anchorage, MLNP in the amount of $56,100 from the Purchasing Department. 9D Delta 16, AM 516-2014, proprietary purchase of power plant software maintenance and support from Power Plant Consultants Incorporated for the Municipality of Anchorage, ML&P, in the amount of $106,663 from the Purchasing Department. Item 9E, Echo 6, AIM 125-2014, the 2014 second quarter reports for utility and enterprise departments from the Office of Management and Budget. Item 9F8A, Ordinance AO 2014-110S, an ordinance of the municipality of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly, repealing Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 1035, solicitation, and amending Section 14.60.030 to delete associated fines by Assembly Vice Chair Traney. The public hearing will be on September 9, 2014. We also have one laid on the table item, as item 9D Delta 9 from Assemblymember Gray Jackson. The subject to AM 499-2014A as a Safe Forth Shaw LLC Professional Legal Services Contract Amendment Number 3 regarding to the port expansion litigation. Are there any other items to lay on the table or addendums? Seeing, hearing none, may I please have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we're down to items to pull. Mr. Starr, anything for you, sir?
No items to pull.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No items this evening.
Ms. Domboski.
9 Alpha 1.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the regular agenda, I'd like to pull 9D9, and the laid on the table item, I'd like to pull 9D9, the A version. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Mr. Traney.
9B2 on the regular agenda.
Thank you, sir. Bravo 2 for those. Mr. Evans.
No items, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Steele.
No items.
Ms. Johnston.
No items, thank you.
Mr. Honeman.
Did you say 9 Bravo 2 has been pulled?
Yes, it has.
Okay. On the regular agenda, 9D Delta 6.
Thank you, sir.
And on the consent agenda, 9B Bravo 5 for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Mr. Hall.
No items.
Okay. Items I'm showing as pulled is 9 Alpha 1, 9 Bravo 2, 9 Bravo 5, 9 Delta 6, and 9 Delta 9. Did I miss anything? Okay, with that, please proceed to vote on the balance of the consent agenda. Mr. Starr.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. That carries unanimously. That brings us to item 9 Alpha 1. Ms. Domboski.
Move to approve.
Second.
I know.
Zero.
Is someone here to accept?
There are. All right. Very good.
Wonderful.
We'll do that next.
A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing September 2014 as Hunger Action Month and encouraging the elimination of hunger in Anchorage, Alaska. Whereas our nation, state, and municipality was built on a sense of community, that together we are stronger than we are as individuals. America is the world's wealthiest nation, and Alaska has billions of dollars in the Alaska Permanent Fund. And whereas, sadly, in 2012, Alaska ranked 15th in the nation for overall food insecurity and 9th in the nation for very low food insecurity, including about 12.5% or approximately 36,470 citizens of Anchorage who do not always have enough food to eat. And whereas, in 2012, Anchorage's child food insecurity rate was 16.7, or 12,530 children who don't know where their next meal is coming from. And whereas 44% of Anchorage's food insecure children are ineligible for food nutrition programs because household incomes are higher than 185% of the federal poverty level. And whereas hunger impacts children in a variety of ways, as food insecure kids don't develop and grow as well as others, the lack of adequate nutrition affects their cognitive and behavioral development, plus coming from food insecure, low-income households, they are more likely to experience irritability, fatigue, and difficulty concentrating. And whereas child hunger in Anchorage, Alaska is completely unacceptable, and we may need help from time to time, whether the cause is a lost job, major health crisis, or simply we cannot make ends meet. And whereas Anchorage has a strong anti-hunger network made up of the food industry, faith-based, tribal, public, and nonprofit organizations who are committed to helping eradicate hunger in Anchorage. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly resolves that September 2014 is recognized as Hunger Action Month in Anchorage, Alaska, and all are encouraged to get involved with anti-hunger activities on behalf of our neighbors in need by contacting the Food Bank of Alaska about the best way to give of their time or financial resources, passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 26th day of August 2014.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for passing this resolution in recognition of Hunger Action Month. I'm Mary Sullivan with Food Bank of Alaska, and we believe that the statistics are dire, but together with neighbors helping each other, hunger can be solved in Anchorage. So thank you very much, and encourage you to visit our website to see about all the activities that will be going on during September for Hunger Action Month.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you.
Before we move on, if you were a appointee to the Anchorage Election Commission, the Board of Building Regulation Examiners and Appeals, Bidding Review Board, Library Advisory Board, Pre-Funding Investment Board, or Public Transit Advisory Board, please come forward so you can introduce yourself. All right. Cleverly avoided us. I don't even see my little sister out there. It's a shame. That brings us to item 9, Bravo 2. Mr. Traney.
Move to postpone this item to the 23rd of September, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to have a work session on this in front of the Assembly, if you would.
Second.
Could you kindly press your buttons, gentlemen?
My screen's not up. There you go. There.
And Ms. Johnston has a question. Ms. Johnston.
Actually, I have a question to the administration. You are going to New York this week, is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct.
And would this be helpful for that trip?
Extremely helpful.
I have a big concern about postponing this because this is really has a lot to do with our bond rating, and I would rather not have us. I'd rather have all of our questions answered this evening and deal with it now than postponing it, because I think it's too important to postpone and then not have it go to New York with our CFO as far as getting AAA bond rating from our other agents.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Mr. Honeman.
Well, and though I am appreciative of that information, I'm concerned why it would be on the consent agenda, not on the addendum to the agenda, not on the regular agenda in the first place, and not having had an opportunity to ask those questions of concern. I mean, we have a AAA bond rating under the current configuration of how we place funding into our fund balances, and so if we're okay in getting AAA bond ratings under our present configuration, I guess I'd like to know a little bit more about the substantive, other than just in general. Yeah, it'd be nice to save more money. And my concern is where would the funding be diverted from, and it seems like we would have to take funding away from service providers or departments, and even more concerning that we're looking ahead at possible deficits for even through the end of the year. So I'm a little concerned. I'd like to have a little more data, and I'm not sure if we'd be able to get that done tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Mr. Traney.
Lucinda, ma'am, when was this first recommended by our bond counsel to switch to this?
Our bond counsel recommended an increase of the 2 to 3% back in 2012. Okay, but what's happened is this particular change to fund balance that you have in front of you is not making any changes to the percent that is set aside. It is only changing the formula that the calculation uses. And the formula change is aligning to the way Fitch and Standard & Poor's calculate.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Johnston?
So this is a suggestion by Fitch and Standard & Poor's.
No. This Fitch and Standard & Poor's calculate our unreserved balance as a percent of expenditures, and that's how they develop our rating. For the last few years, we have been at 17 and 18% of expenditures. That is the reason why we received an upgrade by Standard & Poor's to AAA. Our formula does not calculate the fund balance in that manner. It calculates it as a percent of revenues less the MUSA-MISA contributions that we receive from the enterprises, which means the base that we use to calculate the 10% is low. If we continue with that type of calculation, we will be short in the calculations when compared to Standard & Poor's and Fitch.
A follow-up, Ms. Johnson?
Yes. We currently have funds that have been set aside because of the TAPS ruling. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And how much is that?
It is $7.9 million. And I'd like to indicate that the 7.9 includes previous years plus 2014.
Okay. My concern is what you have here is you've got it at 10%. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what would that bring our overall fund balance calculation up to?
It's currently at 10%.
10% with a 2 to 3% with the emergency funds, right?
Right.
And would that work as far as going to, would Fitch and Standard & Poor's feel that is sufficient?
Yes. At this point, Fitch will not upgrade us to AAA based on our policy, which is 12 to 13%. They say that that is too low for a AAA rating. Standard & Poor's, their low end of the scale is 15%. Our policy is 12 to 13%. The good news is that our performance has been 17 to 18%. So we've been upgraded based on our performance rather than our policy.
I really feel, I would like everybody to ask their questions this evening, but I think if we are going to continue to have our AAA rating, and this is really important to the municipality, not just for municipal bonds, but also school district, and then it has a reflection on our enterprise funds. And currently, interest rates are rather low, so the cost of having a larger fund balance probably is a wash, but this isn't going to be for very long. And the spread is going to be enough that I think it's going to justify changing this policy, and I think we need to do it before this trip to New York. As far as Mr. Hahnemann's concerned, this is on the regular agenda. It wasn't on the addendum. It was in my packet.
First item on regular agenda, unconsidered.
No, you've got the wrong one. It's 9B2. Sorry. So I would definitely say let's not postpone it. Let's vote on it tonight, and let's ask our questions.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Ms. Mahoney, I have you in queue. Do you have anything else you wish to add?
Yes, I would just like to add that we do have a one-time opportunity with the TAPS money that is currently sitting in our fund balance to use that to fund the increase that would be associated with the policy rather than having to increase taxes. We would just be moving that money into the fund balance when this formula, it's in fund balance, but we would not have to raise taxes to meet the increased reserve.
Okay. And Ms. Mahoney?
Or cut expenditures.
Ms. Mahoney, on that point, would you need the entire $7.9 million you referenced previously?
It depends on what we would do. If we would stay at the exact, at 10%, it would represent a $3.8 million increase, and we have 7.9 set aside. So we would have plenty to spare. If you would decide to increase the 10% to 11%, which would get us closer to the benchmark that Standard & Poor's uses, that would be 7.7 million additional, so we would still be under the total amount of the TAPs set aside.
Thank you, Ms. Mahoney. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unless there's, somebody that we anticipate other than Ms. Mahoney answering questions at the work session, I agree with Ms. Johnson that I think it would be very important that we take care of all our questions tonight. Ms. Mahoney did testify before the Budget and Finance Committee on this issue, and I was satisfied with the report, and I urge us to take care of this tonight and also pass the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Honeman.
Okay, so the original statement then, one of my concerns was we're not changing policy, we're just changing the way we calculate formula to meet with Standard & Poor's and Fitch?
That is currently with the way the resolution is written, yes.
Okay, so if I'm understanding it right, because of our performance, 16 to 17%, currently it's 12 to 13%, correct?
Correct. The policy is 12 to 13.
Okay, and we're not changing policy there. Is that what you're saying?
The resolution as it is written does not change the percents.
I guess I'm a little concerned with if our performance is, of course, better than what our policy states, which is the actuals, which we understand. I understand that. And that's gotten us so far, at least under Standard & Poor, I take it, AAA.
That's correct, but not with Fitch. And that's our target for New York next week, is we want to influence Fitch to get us to a AAA rating. We achieved significant savings as a result of being AAA. And I just want to, in addition to lower interest rates, for example, we went out for bid over the last few weeks for our underwriters for the bonds we're going to issue in November. We saved $220,000 just as a result of being AAA because the marketing costs for underwriters is so much lower for being AAA versus A or AA. And, when you are as strong of a credit as we are, it penetrates in so many ways in addition to just lower interest rate. It positively affects our enterprises because of the strong economy and the strong management policies that are in place. And additionally, I just want to, remind you that the school district bonds also, benefit from being AAA because we are the credit for the school district.
And just to follow up, Mr. Chair, if I might, I stated earlier it'd be very nice to have the extra funding, and I'm not certainly opposed to that as a performance level. My concern is as we've projected, your office has projected a possible deficit before the end of the year. And if we absorb fund balance that we have reserved, that puts us in a particular pickle if we've reset our benchmark and we have it, and we've absorbed that money and it's not available to us. Then we're concerned that we have to make perhaps drastic budget reductions and service level reductions in order to make ends meet, because as you're very aware, of course, we've got to balance our budget. So,
absolutely. And we fully understand that. But what we're looking at here is something that is long-term for the city, and it impacts savings throughout all of our enterprises, the school district, and many years into the future.
Ms. Domboski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to preface my question by saying there is no question in my mind of the sound fiscal policies that this administration has put forward. We have a AAA bond rating, which is amazing, and I know how hard that was, how much work went into it. So I just want to give credit where credit's due. But Ms. Mahoney, I do have a question. When we were at the Budget and Finance meeting on Friday, between the bond reserve and the working capital reserve, you had indicated essentially, 12 to 13%. But if we change this, you had indicated then the percentage would change to about 15% between the two. But tonight I'm hearing you say that percentage isn't going to change. Can you clarify? What am I missing?
At the meeting, what I had suggested to the group is that even though I didn't propose a change in the AR to go from 12 to 13 up to 15, I was suggesting to you that that would be a really good decision. And so by talking about it that way, I was hoping that one of you would make an amendment and recognize that it would be a really good decision to up the 10% bond rating closer to 12 for a combined 14 to 15%
And
rating.
if I may follow up, Mr. Chair, so currently we've been working off our actuals, which is about 17%, where we've been hitting that mark. So from a financial perspective, if we were to make that amendment, it is not going to negatively impact us for the 2015 budget, is what you're saying?
It is not, assuming that we have a balanced budget going into 2015, which we will.
And can you quantify for me making that amendment? What's the dollar figure we're talking about? I may have missed it between here, so I apologize.
Well, going up 1%, okay, if you would change the 10% to 11%, that would be a $7.7 million increase.
Okay, so
And we have 7.9 available with TAPS, okay?
I guess that's where my disconnect is, because if we go up 2%, is it not 15%, or 14 million?
If we go up 2%, it would be an additional 11.6 million.
And where's that money come from?
I'm not recommending, truthfully, that we go to 2%. I would just go up 1% because that would be the amount that would be available in the TAPS case.
Okay, so even though you were hoping somebody might make the 2%, you're really not wanting us to make the 2%. Is that what I'm hearing?
I really think 1% is appropriate because that way it wouldn't impact property taxes.
It would not impact property taxes going to 1%.
That's correct.
I keep restating it just to make sure I'm crystal clear.
I mean,
Thank you.
based on my numbers and all of the information that I have today, I mean, who knows what can happen in the future, but based on the numbers today, that is my analysis.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ms. Domboski, before we continue with the discussion, I'm just going to insert myself for a brief moment here. I know you're all very excited about this conversation. That's good. I would ask that if one wants to amend this policy, we do take more time to do it, because if there are surplus funds available, we might want to also think about increasing our trust fund, for example. So,
Mr. Chair,
if I was discussion on this, but
I would just like to say I made those questions. I have no intent on moving that amendment.
I just wanted to clarify for the body what my preference would be. Mr. Steele.
Excuse me, should we call the question on the first motion to postpone it?
You want to call are you making that motion? People are asking their questions.
Okay.
Is that a problem?
No.
Okay. Mr. Steele.
Yeah, my question is, if we have the revenue now the funds now to do that, but then that over time, that's going to restrict us if we don't have these discretionary funds. We're still going to have to, depending upon our expenditure, going to have to place more funds in reserve. Is that correct?
Could you re-ask your question?
Basically, over the long run, this is going to give us less flexibility because we're going to have to keep more reserves.
I wouldn't say that it gives you less flexibility. You would have a higher reserve, but at the same time, you're going to have lower interest rates on your debt, which is significant.
Hopefully. And since this impacts the school district, are they going to have any changes to deal with, or do the funds that we have in reserves carry them as well? I mean, are they going to have to make more reserve?
The school district currently reserves 10% of property taxes that are a component of their revenue, and we are not asking for any changes for their fund balance set aside. However, they will achieve savings in the result of lower interest rates.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really want to thank the mayor and Ms. Mahoney for attempting to have our great city receive another AAA bond rating from the other bond agency. We already have the first one. But when you look at the last fund balance policy from 2011, it had a little bit more detail. It was a little bit different than this, but it still had a little more detail, and I think that this document before us doesn't have enough detail. And I don't really think we had a really in-depth or adequate, if you will, response at our Budget and Finance Committee. And what's troubling to me is this is a big deal, in my opinion, and we're dealing with this a week before our mayor and our CFO is going to go to New York and sell bonds, and now everybody's asking questions. I just wish that we had a little bit more time before they headed out to do their great work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Mr. Traney.
We've been at this now for about 25 minutes by my account, maybe a little less. And all we're talking about is postponing this thing to the 23rd of September. Many times we see something come in front of us, we have to do it right now or the world will end. Well, the world doesn't end. Our AAA rating is a good rating, and I appreciate that. Delaying this to the 23rd of September to have a full work session is not going to be the end of the world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Traney. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to get it on the record for sure that if we vote to pass this, it will not raise property taxes, it will not affect the day-to-day operations of the municipality, and it will not cause a reduction in services to citizens. Am I correct?
Ms. Mahoney.
Through the chair, based on the information that I have today, that is correct. But at any point in time, anything could happen, okay? There's nothing that's 100%.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else in queue, the motion before the body is to postpone this item to September 23rd. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr.
No.
So by a vote of 4 yeas and 7 nays, that motion fails. The original motion to approve is before us. Is there further discussion before voting? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to reset the vote. We actually took up the discussion into postponement prior to a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Thank you very much, Ms. Domboski. Could you press your button? Are you able to do it? Try the on-the-floor button, see if that helps you. All right. Okay, now we have the motion to approve. I apologize for that mistake. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Thank you for being consistent. So by a vote of 10 yeas and 1 nay, that motion carries. That brings us to item 9, Bravo 5. I believe that was you, Mr. Honeman?
Yes. Move to approve.
Would you please press your button? And do we have a second, please? Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Mr. Honeman?
Right. And to the administration, and I apologize, I wasn't at the Budget Committee, and I certainly was out of town until recently and haven't had a chance to look through, being this on the addendum. As I read through, the AIM's fairly short. The funding for, partial year funding for 2 positions in employee relations, 3 positions in finance, are these positions projected to be added to these departments permanently? Is something for the 2015 budget going forward? Is this just like temporary employees? Are we hiring a temp agency? I mean, I guess there's some scant info here.
Yes, through the chair, those are all really good questions, Mr. Honeman. We are requesting to bring these on as permanent employees, recognizing that we need additional staffing in our HR department and in our finance and payroll departments. These employees would come on this year, and then you would see them as additional headcount requests for 2015. And the reason for these requests is because with our SAP implementation, we are planning for a split go-live, meaning 9 of our 11 modules are planned to go live on January 1st, and then 2 of the modules, which are HR and payroll, would go live later. What that means is for that short period of time, we will have duplicate data entry into 2 different systems, and we would need to have additional staff to accommodate that duplicate data entry. Additionally, we need additional help in our HR department to keep our day-to-day operations moving more efficiently, and we also need more help in our finance and payroll area because our goal is to improve both of those processes and not have SAP implement or impact them so much. The long-term vision is that we need these employees also. Then when we go live with SAP, there will inevitably be bumps that we're going to need them to help us with. But then through attrition over the next few years, we'll be able to reduce those positions back and achieve the efficiencies through the system.
Okay. Thank you. To follow up, and I'm not sure, again, there may have been a meeting that I missed being out last week or so. Have we had an update on where we're at with SAP financing, where we're at within the budget? And I apologize for not being there. Where are we at with?
Right. The project team for SAP did a briefing, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, to members of the Assembly. And at that time, they discussed the split go live. And additionally, at that time, they communicated that we are in the process of developing the change order that will be needed in order to accommodate the split go live. They are working on that, and as soon as it is ready, it will be presented at the next work session to you all regarding SAP.
Thank you.
I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. Mr. Hall? And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 9, Delta 6. Mr. Honeman.
Can somebody else please make the motion here?
Please. Ms. Johnson?
Move to accept. Oh, to approve.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Mr. Honeman.
Yes, and just for potential conflict, I just want to disclose Mr. Hornshoe, one of the 2 appointees, and I serve on the same nonprofit at the Anchorage Police Citizen Academy Alumni Association. He's the president. I'm the first vice president. Neither are paid positions, nor is the position that he's being appointed to. So I don't believe I have a conflict, but I leave it to the chair of the body.
Appreciate that notification, Mr. Honeman. I rule that you do not have a conflict and you shall participate. Is there objection to that ruling? Hearing none, and seeing no one else in queue, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 9, Delta 9. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Moved.
Ms. Gray Jackson, could you speak in your microphone a little more carefully, please?
Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman. Move to approve item 9D9, AM 499, 2014A.
Second.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gray Jackson. You wish to speak to your motion?
Briefly, Mr. Chairman, I just think that it's prudent and transparent government if we approve the contract amendment for $600,000 for 2014, because that is in the budget. The additional $900,000 hasn't been appropriated by the Assembly yet, and it's will be part of the 2015 budget. So I believe that and there's also a statement in the that says, if we even need this $900,000. So I think it's just a good idea to approve the $600,000 right now, and then have the administration come back to the Assembly if they need the additional $900,000 in 2015. Then we can address that at that time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gray Jackson. I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 11A, AM 435, 2014, Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility Board of Directors appointments for Mr. Daniel Chad, holy cow, Sirico, and Martin Weinstein. It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr? Thank you, Mr. Starr. And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 11B, Bravo, AM 436, 2014, Board of Adjustment appointment, Baron Guchow from the Mayor's Office.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr? And that carries unanimously. That brings us to item 11C, AM 437-2014, Planning and Zoning appointments for Mr. Tony Cange, Brandon J.M. Spoorhays, and Brandon Walker.
Move to approve.
Second.
Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr? Mr. Steele? And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 11D, Delta, AM 438, 2014, Plating Board appointments, Mr. Trevor Edmondson and Donald R. Porter from the Mayor's Office.
Move to approve.
Second.
Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr? And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 11E, Echo, AM 439, 2014, the Urban Design Commission appointments for Mr. Joe Miller, Ms. Monica Sullivan, and Mr. Gerald L. Jerry Winchester.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr? And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 11F, AM 440, 2014, the Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals appointments for Ms. Stephanie Shanklin, oh boy, we'll say Asher, Dean Cars, and Timothy Vig.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing, hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr? Thank you, Mr. Starr. And that carries unanimously. That brings us to item 11G, AM 448, 2014, the Budget Advisory Commission appointment for Mr. Bob Griffin.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a brief comment before we approve this appointment. And frankly, I want to thank Mr. Steele for basically doing the job that the Assembly is required to do. Because as everybody knows, the Charter requires that the Assembly provide for boards and commissions, and the Charter also provides that the Mayor appoints and the Assembly confirms. And we thank each and every one of you for volunteering your time, but it really is our job, if we have some concerns, to look into those concerns. With that said, I believe Mr. Steele has had some conversations with Mr. Griffith, and I am sure that Mr. Griffith is ready and willing to do a good job on behalf of this community, and I thank him for coming forward and being willing to serve on the Budget Advisory Commission. But again, Mr. Steele, thank you for bringing forward your concerns and doing your job, frankly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Ms. Domboski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to point out to the body that Mr. Griffin is flying somewhere between here and Seattle, so he couldn't be with us tonight. But I do also want to share with the body that I attended the Budget Advisory Commission, their last meeting, and this was a topic that came up, and the Commission overwhelmingly supported his reappointment, not because they always agree with Bob, but because he does bring a perspective that spurs conversation. So I just respectfully request that the Assembly confirm Mr. Griffin for another term. I do think, though we don't always agree with him, all of us, I think he does bring a unique perspective, and I think it's good to have debate. I think it's good to have dissension because it makes us all come up with a better end product. So with that, I just I ask for support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski. I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. That motion carries unanimously. That concludes the items that we can take up before our 6 p.m. So we will take a 20-minute break for a quick bite to eat and be right back. Sorry, Caslin. All right. Would the Assembly please come back to order? Next item on our agenda is item 14A, AR 2014-191, a resolution of Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving the location of a drive-through coffee shop on Tract 5 and a drive-through donut shop on Tract 6 per AO 2001-24S, the Alaska Village Subdivision, Plat 2006-169, zoned B3SL General Business District with special limitations in the Creekside Business Planned Unit Development, generally located at the southwest corner of DeBar Road and Muldoon Road in Anchorage amongst the Northeast Community Council. Case number 2014-54. And just for the recollection of the members, we do have a request from the East Side representatives that this be held over for further consideration. But this is a public hearing, and if you wish to speak to us on this matter at this time, please come forward. Welcome, neighbor.
Good evening. My name is Tamás Deák, spelled D-E-A-K. I'm here to represent the petitioners of the original project. And the message is clear and simple from a petitioner side is please act, don't postpone. This project has been around for 12 years. This particular project has been around for at least one. It went through 2 P&Z hearings in the spring. And what is in front of you is a request to adhere to the ordinance, which is the underlying ordinance, to approve the drive-through, which is part of this plan. There are 2 drive-throughs proposed, one on Tract 5 and one on Tract 6 of Alaska Village. I have talked to Assemblyman Honeman earlier this afternoon. I did not have the chance to talk to Assemblyman Peterson, although we have exchanged voicemails. What I wanted to tell you in brief, we have a project which is been developing for a long time with one caveat to it, which is certainty for developers. When the developers go in and try to solicit agreements for development for various entities, they look for certainty. We cannot provide certainty without having a site plan. Without going through the site plan review process, we obviously can do that. We have done that. We met our obligations. And actually, with my track record of the 12 years I've been working with the Northeast Community Council, I have talked to numerous of the members. And this time, I only talked to Mary Padlow. We did not go to the Community Council meeting specially for this particular case, but it was a fully addressed and fully noted site plan review hearing. And what's in front of you, in our view, is the drive-throughs only. And with that, I really appreciate that it comes today, because this is the scheduled meeting, and obviously we are interested in moving forward. I don't have any other comments unless you have questions.
I see no further questions, sir, but thank you for coming down this evening. Does anybody else wish to speak to us on this matter? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to postpone to the meeting of, looks like as I'm looking through the meeting notes, October 7th, and to continue the public hearing.
So your motion is to continue the public hearing, sir?
Yes. And I'll explain why if you'd like.
Okay. Do we have a second? It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Honeman?
Yes, and I appreciate Mr. Deák explaining our conversation earlier. He's correct in the sense that there was a master plan, and I know Mr. Trainee, you might be intimately familiar, as he was on the body at the time, I believe was the chair, and there's some signatures that represent that. This particular project or area has been ripe for concerns over the type of developments, particularly drive-through restaurants, unless it has been explained and fully vetted, if you will, for meeting the master plan of 2001. It's documented in the ordinance. The concern is that if you look on page 504 and 505 in the packet on 14A, the Planning Department and the Community Development Division had recommended denial of the projects based on some of the concerns of it not meeting the intent and spirit of the master plan in the 2001 ordinance. Mr. Diak stated that his only variation, if he believes, on our earlier conversation, was the fact that it was a drive-through restaurant, which was reserved in that ordinance in 2001, that come before the Assembly for approval based on the community concerns. And so with that, in my discussions with several members of the Northeast Community Council, and Mr. Peterson was at the last meeting and probably can confirm, there has been no conversations with the Community Council. There has been no input. There has been no dialogue, and I don't believe it's at I don't know where the miscommunication or the the dropping of that connect is, but it is very important to Northeast Community Council to have at least been aware and informed of the projects that are planned, and in particular when it comes to drive-through restaurants. One of the projects is identified as a donut shop, and for the record, I really do appreciate donuts, and I have a belief that I know what particular company might be going there. But on the other, it's a coffee shop, and if you recall, about 2 months ago, this body approved a Starbucks going into a tract on the other side of the Walgreens. So when I talked with Mr. Diak, he stated that, again, it goes into a speculation building. So not that, and it was very clear. It could be that a project comes in or a company might want to use that tract for something not a drive-through, which means they would drop that off the plan. And that is their right, obviously, to reserve. But it's very concerning to the community that they haven't heard. And in fact, I heard from the Community Council President today, they do have this item placed on their agenda for next month. And so I respectfully request to my colleagues that we postpone this and give the opportunity. Mr. Peterson, you may have some other information.
Thank you, Mr. Honan. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just a bit concerned about the delay here. We do have a process of how these projects are developed. This project's been going on for a long time. It's been through planning and zoning. I'm not sure what the reason was why the Community Council didn't weigh in before. It's obviously not a project that has been secret. I'm concerned about the precedent of having developers go through the process and then get to this stage where we're supposed to take action. We have public hearings scheduled, and then because somewhere along the line somebody feels they didn't get enough notice, even though the process has been fully complied with, that we delay it, especially for a couple of months. I'm very hesitant to approve this delay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I actually did attend the Northeast Community Council meeting last Thursday. This was not on their agenda, and they actually did not meet the previous month. And so the fact that many community councils do not meet in the summer months kind of put them in a position where they weren't able to weigh in on this. And so I think it's important that the people who are going to be most affected by this development get a chance to put their input into the process. And Mary Pedlow, who was mentioned as a person of contact with the Northeast Community Council, has not been president in several years and is no longer an officer, and I only occasionally see her at meetings. So if you were speaking with her, she is in no position to speak for what the Community Council would do or would not do. So I would appreciate it if my colleagues would allow this to be postponed so that the Community Council members can get their say on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Honeman, and wrap up.
Yes, and I've spoken to Mr. Diak, and I've talked with Community Development today. I believe there have been no plans presented. I'm pretty convinced, after talking with Mr. Diak, that they have entered into potential clients, but there's nothing has been confirmed. And of course, their concern is that they're not going to be moving forward unless they get some certainty on the tracks to develop. And I understand that, but I had asked that was this going to, if you will, cost money per se or any interest in delay, and I don't believe there's anything that, other than speculation. I don't know that the only concern that he had was that a coffee shop now going in on Track 5, which has been approved, or Track 4 that is going to impact the Track 5 coffee shop proposed that they have. So That's a done deal from a couple of months ago. That had nothing to do with this particular project, other than that they tracked a little bit the same. So anyway, I yield to Mr. Weaver. I guess I'd ask if you could a question on 505 and 504 in specific. If I might, Mr. Chair.
Welcome, Mr. Weaver. Your question, Mr. Honeman?
Yes, Mr. Weaver, I know I had just a brief conversation, and you said you were going to do a little review. Is it the position of the Planning Department or Community Development Division Department, is it, does these proposals meet the 2001 ordinance master plan development in your review?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Honeman, with the provisions that were imposed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, which are on pages 1 through 4 of your packet, it brings it closer to the conformity of the intent of the 2001 ordinance with respect to pedestrian connectivity, traffic circulation, and access. Originally, we had concerns with respect to the proposal. We did talk to the applicant at length about it, and the conditions that are imposed by the Planning Commission, which their plan doesn't really reflect today, if they're applied, they'll be pretty close to the intent of the 2001 ordinance.
So not exact, but pretty close.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. And Mr. Honeman, just to clarify, your motion was to postpone to October, or to continue to October 7?
That's correct.
Okay. I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. Ms. Johnston? We don't allow that here. Okay, by a vote of 6 yeas and 5 nays, that motion carries. We will continue the public hearing on this on October 7. That brings us to item 14B, AR 2014-192, a resolution confirming and levying special assessments for Special Assessment District 06-20, which constructed street improvements to B Street between 40th Avenue and True Road, and setting the date of assessment, installment payments, interest on unpaid assessments, and providing for penalties and interest in the event of delinquency from the Public Works Department. That's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 410-2014. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. And that carries unanimously. That brings us to item 14C, AO 2014-96, an ordinance of Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code section 14.70.190 to adopt a calendar year basis for police false alarm charges with an annual reset, and replacing the annual security alarm registration fee requirement with a one-time registration fee. It's brought to us by Assembly Vice Chair Traney and Assembly Member Domboski. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed.
Move approval.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Mr. Hall.
Yes. One of my
Your microphone, sir.
one of my concerns, well, actually I've got two. One issue I probably don't have a problem at all with is resetting at the end of the year, but I think we need a C document to go with this so we have some idea what the cost is, what this is going to cost the police department, what it's going to cost taxpayers if we fund this with funds other than those generated by registration fees for security systems. So I would actually encourage delaying this for 2 weeks to try to get some of that information, unless that information is readily available this evening. But I think it's an important part of making this decision.
Do you have a motion, sir?
Pardon?
Do you have a motion, sir?
I do. I would move to postpone till our next meeting, awaiting getting some a C to attachment to go with it.
Second.
That would be September 9. Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Mr. Honeman, I see you in queue. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
kind of on the same, I would like to see, and perhaps at that time have the chief step up and explain. I've heard that these was not necessarily opposed to all the changes, but with the knowledge that we may have concerns, I'm not sure for the end of the year, between now and the end of the year budget, I'm not sure how that would impact. So I look forward to the postponement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Honeman. Mr. Trainee, and then Mr. Bosky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hall, as it relates to the calendar year change, that's already being done by the police department. We just need to have it in code so it's followed every year. Because the chief wasn't sure. Chief checked and it was not in code. So this puts it in code. So on 31 December, they reset the clock. Because we don't want people that have a burglar alarm anywhere in town being charged with something that happened 2 or 3 years ago, sir. Just cleans it up.
And Ms. Dombowski.
Mr. Chairman, I had asked the CFO to help me prepare C, potentially, and APD had difficulty quantifying exactly how much this would potentially cost. Initially, Chief Mew was supportive of this, and now, as of today, the administration came back with a number, though I think is inflated and completely speculative. They are saying that, sorry, Lucinda, but they are saying potentially $385,000. So, with that said, I totally, though I support this ordinance, and, I would encourage passage of it, I think we're asking people to register alarms. Okay, they do it once, but every year we're taking their money for doing nothing. It makes no sense to me. So I will support this. Absolutely, but I understand other members who are requesting that information. I'll probably vote against the delay because, like I said, I know the number, and or the number the administration has proposed to me today. I don't know that I agree with it, but I know it. But with that said, I just wanted to tell you in an effort to be completely candid, that's the number I was given today.
Thank you, Ms. Dombowski. And I think Ms. Mahoney wants to expand on that.
Through the chair, I did not calculate the number, Ms. Dombowski. The number was calculated by the police department. What we did is Chief Mew asked that the Treasury Department do a thorough analysis to determine whether or not it was in the ballpark. Chief Mew acknowledged in the email that he thought that the number could be more precise.
Thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no problem with the delay. This doesn't seem to be a matter of urgency. So I'll support the motion to delay this to get better financial information. I am concerned that, if in fact we're actually charging folks upwards of $385,000, to renew, which is basically just a paperwork function, I would be concerned about that. But I would like to see that number, and I'll support the motion to delay.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trainee?
Chief, why don't you come up and join us?
He was hoping he wouldn't have to do that.
I know, but he's in the room.
Welcome, Chief Mew.
So, Chief, if we give you some more time, can you get a more precise estimate on the amount of money we're dealing with?
We agree that these numbers are swags. They're way higher than I expected them to be. I'm not sure why that is, but I do want to clear a couple things up. One, they're not inflated. They're just, we don't have a good way to dig at this, and we want somebody, an accountant, maybe Mr. Moore, to come over and help us figure out if we're doing this the right way. I initially was in favor of both of these. I didn't think the impact would be great. But what I looked at here was pretty scary, and I think it would be reckless to either accept these numbers or reject them and make a decision of this magnitude without spending a little more time digging into it. The $383,000 is not attributable to the registration. It's attributable to resetting on January 1 and giving a freebie each year. That's where the big money is. The big money is not in the registration end of it. And, of course, these numbers may be wrong. So that's why I was hoping that we would get a couple more weeks to flesh them out and get somebody from outside to come in so that no one would accuse the police department of trying to inflate the numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Chief Mew. I think Mr. Evans has a follow-up question. Oh, Mr. Trainee first, sorry.
Chief, I've got no problem giving you some additional time. I just looked up swag on the dictionary, and interesting term.
I put that term right in my report today, Mr. Trainee.
Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Mew, I'm glad to hear it changes my question that the 385 represents more or less the freebie, not the registration fee. But to the extent we don't know what the registration fee number is, what would also be helpful if in putting this together you could provide how much it actually costs, whatever out-of-pocket expenses you have in administering this program to justify the registration fees.
Sure. Actually, we're more comfortable with the figure we've got for registration, and I can discuss that now, or we can put that off and have the whole discussion later. That one's a little easier for us to get our hands around. It's the first-time freebie that we're having difficulty with.
I'm fine putting it all together.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Trainee has one more question for you before you sneak off, Mr. Trainee.
Chief, just when did we start collecting this fee? How long ago?
2011, I believe, was the first year.
And Ms. Domboski, you need the chief to stay up here?
I don't. I was just
Okay.
going to say,
You
I
can sit
think,
down. Thanks, Chief.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
in order to make sure we have all our ducks in a row before we vote on something like this, I'm fine with putting it off 2 weeks. Let's just go for it and have all our ducks in a row.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski. With that, please proceed to vote on the motion to postpone to our meeting of September 23. Oh, sorry, September 9. Mr. Starr. And that motion carries unanimously. We'll take this up in 2 weeks. That brings us to item 14D, Delta AO 2014-97, an ordinance authorizing disposal of a municipal interest via vacation of a portion of an easement no longer required in the south one-half of the southwest one-quarter of Section 5, Township 13 North, Range 3 West, Seward Meridian, Alaska, as it affects Lots 8 and Lot 9, Block 3, in the Australaska Subdivision, Plat 66-101, brought to us by Municipal Light and Power, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum AM 427-2014. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter and actually know what I just said, please come forward at this time. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing no one, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 14E, Echo AO 2014-98, an ordinance authorizing a ground lease of municipal property legally described as Tract A, Block P, U.S. Survey 3458A, North Edition, Number 7, Original Town Site, located at 566 East Bluff Drive, brought to us by the Real Estate Department and accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 428-2014. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. Did you wish to speak on this one?
I withdraw my motion.
Come on down. We'll pretend we never closed a public hearing and you can speak to us.
Thank you, sir. I just want to verify, this is regarding the use by the restaurant for public property to park with, is that correct?
It is not.
Oh, I apologize.
That item will be item 14G. We're 2 items away.
I apologize.
Quite all right. Okay, with that,
Move to approve.
well, I have to reclose the public hearing first, so public hearing is closed.
Now move to approve.
It's been seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 14F, Foxtrot. That's AO 2014-99, an ordinance authorizing a lease with the General Federation of Women's Clubs, Anchorage Women's Club, a nonprofit corporation at 437 East 3rd Avenue, Anchorage, Alaska, at less than fair market value from the Real Estate Department. It's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 429-2014. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. And that motion carries unanimously. Now, ma'am, this brings us to item 14G. AO 2014-100, an ordinance modifying AO 2014-83, which authorized a land use permit of municipal property to Midnight Moon Company, Incorporated, doing business as the Rustic Goat Restaurant, and approved a conditional use permit for off-street parking on municipal property, legally described as lots 7Q, 8Q, 9Q, 10Q, and 11Q on Block Q in the Woodland Park subdivision, to delete lot 7Q and add lot 12Q, approve the land use permit, site plan, and conditional use permit for off-street parking, and waive Anchorage Municipal Code 21-10-015A, Planning and Zoning Commission review, brought to us by the Department of Law. Those of you who have picked up the packet out front don't have the summary of economic effects, but we do have the one from the last ordinance that will be appended reflecting the lease value. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come on down. We will take the time to hear from all of you. Feel free to take a seat in the front if you don't want to be standing in line. Welcome back, sir.
Deja vu. My name's Bill Wortman, and it's spelled W-O-R-T-M-A-N. I'm the president of Turnagain Community Council, and I've been here before. It's nice to see Barb. The Rusty Goat owners have been very engaged with the Community Council all the way from last winter. In fact, this last Sunday, they had a meeting for the neighbors, closed to the public, but for the neighbors, and they provided dinner and drinks, and then they had a meeting afterward to get input from the neighbors, what their concerns are, suggestions, etc. So kudos to the owners, because they've been coming and trying to work with the community on the traffic and parking problems. One of the things that came out in the meeting is one of the gentlemen that lives in the neighborhood is a guy that drives fire trucks. And based on how people are parking on 29th Street, many times he said he would not be able to get a fire truck through there. So that adds to the safety or the lack of safety on Turnagain Street, where people are parking too much, walking down the street, etc. The Turnagain Community Council passed a motion in the June meeting overwhelmingly supporting an additional parking lot as is planned on community land, paid for by Kaladi Brothers, and a parking lot that's open to the public, not just for Rusty Goat customers. The construction season is quickly disappearing. There's very little opportunity this year to get this done if it's not passed. And then the community, as well as the neighbors, are going to be dealing with snow berms and parking in icy streets. And that's my concern. The owner's probably going to put in a substantial amount of money to make the parking lot on land he will never own. And I think that makes him a good neighbor. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Wortman. We do have a question from Mr. Traney.
Sir, would it change your mind if you realize that that parking lot will only be open to patrons of the Rustic Goat?
Pardon me?
It will only be open to patrons of the Rustic Goat. I talked to Mr. Michaelis, city manager, and he confirmed that once it's transferred to them, they develop it. It will only be open to patrons of the Rustic Goat.
That was not my understanding. Nobody's ever mentioned that as a possibility.
I think Mr. Michaelis wants to clarify. Mr. Michaelis?
Michaelis?
Thank you very much. The way the agreement reads, it's for the exclusive use of the owners of the Rustic Goat, which means that they, once this agreement is signed, have the authority to either allow folks to use it during their non-business hours or even during business hours, or not allow them to use it at all. It's the agreement right now as it stands allows them exclusive use. Now, if they have committed to the community something different than that, once they take control of that property, then they certainly could exercise whatever they've committed. But right now, the way the agreement reads, it's exclusive use. But that does not preclude them from allowing others to use it. It just means it's their discretion to decide how that's used.
Okay, we're going to leave that topic for now. I suspect we have an owner's representative here. We can ask that question of when that time comes. Mr. Wortman, I see no one else in queue. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Good to see you again. And folks, you're welcome to sit in front. We'll get to you. You don't have to stand the whole time, we promise. Welcome, sir.
Hi. My name is Jimmy Froelich, last name Froehlich. Dear Anchorage Assembly members and Mayor, thank you for this opportunity to speak about a matter which directly affects me, my family, and my neighbors. I urge you to reject a conditional use permit for an off-street parking lot in the R3 district on municipal property for the Rustic Goat Restaurant, also called the Rustic Goat Bistro. When I presented my comments at the hastily called Assembly meeting on July 8th, I said the parking lot plan was ill-considered and would not solve the safety issues raised by many people who commented. I continue to believe the Assembly is acting in haste. This time, the issue of paving before winter seems to be a motivating factor. I also believe the construction of this lot will encourage people to jaywalk across Turnagain Street near a busy intersection and will result in many serious accidents. Doesn't it give you pause that no one thought to ask if the size of this lot was too big or too small? Shouldn't this decision be made on the basis of a count or an analysis of some kind? Co-owner Mr. Gravel told me that he felt the added lot would be more than needed for his restaurant. The lot proposed is huge. I've paced it out. Even a glance at the proposed drawing shows a lot of the proposed expansion will more than double the parking available. The best idea I heard recently is to reduce the size of the proposed parking lot by 50%. Can this please be reduced a bit? I propose cutting a new parking lot to 15 spaces, or approximately 5,000 square feet. If you can reduce the Title 21 requirement for parking for the B1A designated multi-use property by 50%, I'm pretty sure you can reduce the 10,000-foot requirement for surface parking of leased property by 50%. On July 8th, we heard many comments from affected neighbors, the developer, and assembly members. Developer James Brook called this a pilot project with problems that need to be fixed. That was certainly an understatement. Assemblymember Dombrowski said it, quote, felt like we failed. I couldn't agree more. By urging members to act quickly, she disregards the risk created by this venture. Mr. Honeman asked if other alternatives were considered. Thank you. We were told by the developer, Mr. Brooks, that there were no alternatives. I call this a failure of imagination. It seems clear to me the work done on Title 21, with all its woes, will continue to haunt this chamber. I continue to ask that you reject this ill-considered proposal. If you can't reject it outright, please send it back to the developer with a reduction of the size of the lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I see a question from Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sir, if it is true, and we don't know yet, we'll have to hear from the owners, but if the Rustic Goat is going to allow public parking in that lot as well as their patrons, would it not be a benefit to the area to have that additional parking instead of restricting the parking lot to only take care of their patrons? As I understand, there's already
I call that a non-issue. We don't have sidewalks in the area. The city has yet to put up no parking signs. You know, it's kind of a fiasco. And putting in a parking lot is just going to ask people to walk across the street to the restaurant, some of whom who have been drinking. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, ma'am. Good to see you again.
Thank you. I apologize for my untimeliness.
Not at all.
My name is Pat Lentz, and I come here as a citizen, as a fifth-generation owner of a small business, not in Alaska, but having a great deal of experience in small business. And I personally find it very difficult to understand the philosophy behind government supporting a single individual privately owned business that planned, built, and opened a business knowing that there was a potential for problems. And then coming to you folks with a problem and a solution, but that solution involves the government supporting one business. My questions are these. Number one, do you have an official policy for this? Because you are setting a precedent. And to me, that's a very dangerous precedent because it's one that can be interpreted in many ways. And will it be enforced without prejudice to any small business? So if I decide to open a business and buy a small lot and open a restaurant and find out there's no parking, can I come to you and say, gee, you know, we've got a safety issue here, which I agree there's a safety issue. I've been in that area. But to solve the safety issue that was knowingly created from a business, I just don't understand that. I'm sorry. I do not understand Anchorage Assembly assisting a single businessman or woman at the expense of public property. I do not believe that's what our forefathers meant when they sectioned off and made these regulations to protect the property. What if someone wants to build a building on the Tony Knowles Trail? We already have that issue with some other businesses, shall we say. So I just really, really recommend caution and hope that you will use your judicial powers with a great deal of consideration regarding setting a precedent that you may not want to have to follow. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lance. Welcome, sir.
Hello.
Thank you for coming down.
Thank you for allowing us to comment. My name is Weiji Tazi. I live at 2606 West 29th, a very close neighbor to the Rustic Goat. There's three issues here. There's the issue of safety. There's the issue of the existing use of the land in question, and the issue that the woman before me just mentioned regarding the municipality putting themselves in a situation of essentially subsidizing a large portion of the cost of business the cost of doing business for a local business. As far as the safety issue goes, there's no question that the parking issues and the safety issues on the street need to be addressed. It's my belief that by putting a parking lot into the land that's been set aside is not going to solve the problem, but simply change it. As an earlier commenter pointed out, this solution is probably going to encourage people to jaywalk across Turnagain Street rather than going out to Northern Lights and across at the light and back. They'll cross at the alley there. Those intersections are not improved, and they're also very close to Northern Lights, and so it would only take 2 or 3 vehicles turning onto Turnagain from Northern Lights or coming up Turnagain from the south before we would end up with quite a bit of traffic, which ends up hanging out into Northern Lights or down the street where I live. So I don't think it's going to solve the problem. And of course, winter is just going to make it worse. And I've tried walking to the Rustic Goat from my home, which is really the only solution for me. My driveway is actually closer than most of the parking. So, and it's very difficult. So having people walking there is really not a good solution. The second issue is with regard to the existing use of the land. Even though the land is currently not designated as a park in any sort of legal sense, as far as the neighborhood is concerned, it's a park. It's maintained as if it were a park. The lawn is cut. It has parking spaces. It has boundaries between the road and the open space itself, and it has paths. By any practical definition from a resident, it's a park. And so it causes 2 problems for me there. One is we're going to take a big chunk of it and turn it into a parking lot, and whether or not the public has access to that is going to be up to the owners of the Rustic Goat. And second, it's going to cause a liability issue, either because existing uses are not compatible with a parking lot, a kid throws a ball and hits a car or something.
If you can just wrap up real quickly, sir.
Okay.
We have a
Sure.
question for you anyway. So.
The last thing is just that I agree with the woman before me. I don't think that we should be leasing public land to a business for essentially zero. I mean, that's less than the cost of one entree per day there.
And Mr. Gray Jackson has a question for you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Tozy, for coming out and testifying this evening, and everyone else who is here. But you talked about what isn't a good solution. Do you have any solutions?
Well,
Mr. Chairman.
It's going to be tough, I think, to come up with something good. But the thing that occurred to me is the alley there, the unimproved alley that's included in the plan, is really not suitable for any sort of traffic at all. But if it were improved, maybe instead of taking a big chunk of land, if we were to just take a relatively narrow strip adjacent to that alley and put diagonal parking in that spot, I think it would essentially meet all of the current, all of the same needs of the current plan without taking away a big chunk of that property. I've heard some concerns from some neighbors that there's some very nice old lilac bushes there, but certainly those could be replaced if we're going to be doing some work there anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Gray Jackson. Thank you, sir. Mr. Greenhall.
Mr. Flynn.
You still have to introduce yourself.
Sorry, my name is David Greenhall, and I'm actually going to go against the grain here. I'm going to say that the rustic goat is a positive attribute to the Turnagain area. I think the public process has worked wonderfully. It has improved the value of the neighborhood, both aesthetically, and of course it's providing higher paying jobs to community members. And we walk there, my entire family, the 6-year-old, 9-year-old, and 14-year-old high school freshman. Anyway, I understand people's concerns with the streets and the roadways. I've commuted on my bicycle, so I share their sentiment there. But that being said, I think you'll find from the owner representatives that'll be here today that many of the concerns that you've heard will be belayed by things that transpired or discussions that transpired with the community members as far as the crosswalk and whatnot. So again, I believe that we have an owner or owners that are going well beyond what they need to do, given the sense that they currently meet the requirement for parking spots for that location for the number of seats they have. So I'm in support of the parking lot wholeheartedly. I think it's a nice problem to have, that there's a lot of folks coming to your restaurant, and having grown up in the restaurant business, I don't think anybody that opens a restaurant expects to be this busy. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Greenhall. I see no questions. Welcome, sir.
My name is Red Bradley. Most of you have received emails from me, and I'd like to enter these into your record, if I may.
You just hand to the clerk, sir. Thank you.
I have a couple concerns about the whole process. One of them is that I live within the area that I should have gotten a notice if Spinell Homes received a notice about this hearing. I should have received one as well, and I didn't. I don't think that it's adequate that 150 notices were sent out for 2 hearings. That's an average of about 75. So I'm much closer than Spinell. Secondly, I think that my concern stems from where the parking lot is being put, not that there is a parking lot being built. The Rustic Goat has alternatives, as I've mentioned in my emails that I've sent most of you, and some of you responded, and some that represent my area have not. But it is an unimproved alley that at best is one way, which the images showed that I sent today, and there are bigger versions in that packet that I gave you. The parking lot is as planned is, while it's a really nice drawing, fails to note that there are power lines and utility lines running in that area. And it's a parking lot where the in and exit are both in the same area. I believe that there are alternatives that can be pursued. Currently, the Rustic Goat is renting spaces that are underutilized or not utilized at all at the EBCO building, which is immediately to their west. Further down the alley at the very end, at the corner of Barbara and the alley, is a space that the Muni also owns that already has a space and is much larger without moving the trees and acts as a better conduit for the entire community in that you can park there because the pedestrian bridge is there, so you can start in onto the Tony Knowles Trail from there. So it also allows for an entrance and an exit on one end, an entrance on one end and an exit on the other, which is going to be better for the flow of traffic. If you live in that area in the winter, and I live on Lord Baranoff, there are times where it's reduced to a one-way street and it's a major thoroughfare. How they are going to control traffic down an unimproved alley is beyond me, and thank you.
There's a question for you from Ms. Domboski. So, Ms. Domboski.
Hey, over here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. How close would you say you are to Rustic Goat?
A block and a half.
So in feet?
Oh.
Like 700, 1,000, 1,500?
150 yards? No, must be, I don't know. However long a block is.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
That's quite all right, Mr. Bradley. Thank you very much for coming down this evening.
Thank you.
Welcome, sir.
Good evening. My name is Lucas Gamble, and I'm a 34-year resident of the Spenard and Turnagain area. I was born and raised within a half mile and currently live within a half mile of the Rustic Goat. I'm in full support of the land use permit allowing for the construction of this 11,000 square foot parking lot at the subject property, which I understand to be owned by municipal land. Much has been made about safety in the area, and I have to agree there is a safety concern, and this parking lot is the best way to alleviate. I think a little bit has been made about the unimproved alley, too. I think that actually points to the fact that people aren't going to jaywalk in that area. And in fact, as shown on the maps, they're likely to use the sidewalks because, as we all know, it's difficult to make your way down an unimproved alley. And no offense to the city on perhaps a poorly maintained road. Having grown up in the area, it was expressly prohibited as a kid to use that intersection to get from the Turnagain side to the Spurnagan side, if you will, of the neighborhoods. As an adult now, routinely as a pedestrian with my family accessing the Rustic Goat, I've actually seen a hypervigilance, if you will, of drivers and an awareness of pedestrian activity. This intersection is far, far safer than it's been in my entire adult life and certainly as a child. So again, I'm in full support of this land use permit supporting the Rustic Goats parking lot, or West parking lot. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll pretend you didn't say Spurnagan. Welcome, sir.
Hi. Evening. My name is Reno Romero. Address is 3009 Brookside Drive. I'm about a block and a half away from Rustic Goat. My family and I, we love the Rustic Goat. It's an absolutely beautiful building. They've got fantastic food on their menu, other than not having anything for kids, which I think they need. It's a great place to go. We love Rustic Goat. We love walking up there. You guys have been in the neighborhood before. The streets are extremely narrow. In the wintertime, it's a disaster. When this place first opened up, it was an absolute disaster until they started putting the cones up. I am in support of the parking lot for a few reasons. Not so much of let's pave a park or anything. I'm in support of this multi-use concept that we got going on. Everybody wants the same thing. We want to be able to walk to a coffee shop, an ice cream store, a bakery in our neighborhood, no matter if you live on the hillside or downtown. We all want it. The thing is if we're going to do this under Title 21, then you guys need to pave some streets. You need to put some sidewalks in. The onus isn't on so much this mixed use that we're doing. If we're going to do this, well, then let's do it right. Let's pave some streets. Let's do some sidewalks so we can walk there safely. From what I understand, I went to the meeting on Sunday that he had with the community there, and Mr. Gravel, I was pleasantly surprised. Before I went to the meeting, I was like, I don't know about this. But after going to the meeting, I was pleasantly surprised that Mr. Gravel is very much in tune to listening to our suggestions for the parking lot other suggestions, what else to do. He's very in tune to wanting to work with the neighborhood, which really swayed my personal opinion of this whole thing. And from what I understand, he's going to improve the alley, pave the alley. He's going to put a guardrail up on Turnagain so that you can't jaywalk. You're forced to go to the crosswalk. He's going to leave the shrubbery, the trees, and all that stuff there. My goal now is to, let's make this not just a parking lot, but let's make this aesthetically as nice as the building itself. Let's put a fence on the parking lot so that the people across from the parking lot don't have to look at a parking lot. Let's just make it look nice. Let's encourage this multi-use development with living and being able to walk. But I challenge you guys to pave some streets, do some sidewalks, make it so that we can walk to these places safely.
Thank you very much, sir. I see no question. Welcome, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Sandra E., spelled Y-I. I live about 5 blocks away from the Rustic Goat, which is actually a perfect distance. We can walk there comfortably, which from hearing about this, it's probably a good solution. And we haven't seen an impact to our driveway or to our house. Obviously, as people have been saying, safety is a big concern with the Rustic Goat. We've seen a lot of increase in traffic. We've seen some erratic driving. But overall, I think I'm very supportive of this new parking spot. I think the extra 28 spots would alleviate a lot of the safety concerns that we would have, and it would reduce the number of cars that are pulling out into the traffic. I guess I also chose to live in Turnagain because of all the trees and all the greenery and all the parks nearby. And from the sound of it and from talking to the owners, we know that it's only going to impact about 11% of that green area, and it's not going to pull out any of our Turnagain trees. A lot of the neighbors have been complaining about the traffic of the Rustic Goat, and all of that aside, the Rustic Goat is existing and it's popular and it's proven that it's more than just a neighborhood bar and restaurant. So I think it's our responsibility or your responsibility to make sure that we mitigate a lot of the neighbors' concerns as well as to close any of the safety gaps that we obviously see. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. E. Mr. Gravel, did you bring treats?
Hi, my name is Tim Gravel. I'm one of the owners of the Rustic Goat. I'd like to talk to you about how I got here today. And when we started this project, we had no idea it was going to be this busy. We did the best we could. We built the best building we could. We tried to look at every little detail. We hope we didn't lose a lot in this project. When we opened the doors in February, we saw, and let me back up. A lot of people said to us during the process of seeing the building built, oh, you guys are going to do really well. Well, you hear that with lots of stuff you do, and then people don't show up. So I did hear some things, just to be honest, but you're cautious. When we opened the doors, we saw a problem. And the very next day I was at the city, and I was at the traffic department saying, what can I do? I don't have signs right here in front of my building. There's people parking on the street in front of the building, and it's a disaster. And some signs went up. It helped for right there. People moved into the neighborhoods. It started parking. We all know the sidewalks. There's no sidewalks. Berms get built up. Cars get narrow. Cars have a hard time getting through the streets. A lot of people upset. We got some additional parking. We put up signs. We put up Facebook posts, all this stuff everyone's heard already. I don't want this with the neighborhood. So anyway, in May, I got a call from the municipality and said, here we have a piece of land that we can lease you. You have to build this, you have to lease it from us, but it should alleviate some of this problem with people parking throughout the neighborhood. Will you do it? And I said, yes, I'll do it. And so here we are. As some people said about we're going to use the parking only for Rustic Goat. I'm not going to keep it closed to only Rustic Goat people. We'll build something. We'll build something nice. I had the meeting at our restaurant to invite the public in, get some ideas on it. So we can, if we can build something, we will build something that they like to see. And if there's things we can add to it that the municipality will approve, via picnic tables, whatever we can do to make it nice, we're happy to do it. I want to listen to what's wanted, and to have something more than just a parking lot. I don't know what else. I know my customers coming in has created much more traffic in this neighborhood. I agree, and I don't dispute that. I don't dispute the safety issue.
If you can quickly wrap up,
Yes.
Mr. Gravel, there's
But I don't know what
a
else.
few questions for you.
Right, yeah. I don't know what else I can do. I've asked the municipality and the police department and traffic, what can I do? This is something offered to me to do, and I'm willing to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Gravel. We'll start with Mr. Trainee.
Sir, so for the record, you're not going to enforce any parking restrictions on this property?
No, sir, unless people are dumping cars and leaving them multiple nights and that kind of a situation. I don't want a bunch of dumped cars on the lot. We'd probably tow those away.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With a seating capacity of over 80, I would imagine you probably have many times 10 or 12 or maybe even more employees than that working. Where do the employees park, and have you tried having the employees ride together, or what are you doing to mitigate the employee parking problem?
Right. The employees have been parking down, and I don't know the name of it, but there's a municipal parking lot down the alley to the east of us, and they've been parking there and doubling up. They've also been parking in the place we lease, two places. One, Ray's, that's all I just know is Ray's, but across the street to the east, there's the first lot there. We've leased spaces there, and we also lease a space at Chuck Bingham's, the EEC. It's a building directly to the west of us, and they're asked to park in there also.
Okay, one additional question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I was wondering, have you, I don't know how you would go about this, but have you tried offering discounts to people who came in groups of 3 or 4 or more?
Right. Well, not quite, but we did run a thing in May asking people to walk, bike, ride, and we donated money to Turnagain Elementary PTA for that. And I did say, I was in a meeting a couple weeks ago, and I said I would have something done by tonight. We have, and they're going out tomorrow, a walk, bike, ride punch card, and be free appetizer after you go 4 times. And we'll play with those ideas, but we are starting them. Not on your question, but can I give you guys something?
Sure.
Okay.
So you need to bring up to the clerk's office, the clerk here, and then Mr. Honeman has a question for you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Honeman.
Yes. Mr. Gravel, something intrigued me today, and I'm sorry I didn't make it to your meeting, but my understanding is you're trying to, if successful and this is approved, you're going to attempt to try to put something up to prevent people from walking straight across Turnagain.
Right. I've already had a meeting with the municipality about that, and we would have a walkway barrier, which would be, I'm guessing 32 inches, 36 inches tall, that would direct people from the parking lot to the crosswalk on Northern Lights and Turnagain Street. And so they would have to hop the barrier, go across the lawn, or snow, or they would have to walk through the alley. And if they were to jaywalk, they would come from the alley, obviously.
Have you thought about perhaps for lack of better terms, either a gravel walk path or something with a wrap or something that, I don't know if that would be approved along with this, or it would be.
It's going to be a paved walkway.
Okay. And then.
I'm not sure if that's what you mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're not going to cut any trees or
None.
Any more trees?
None.
Okay. And then I did hear a comment about a fence to try to alleviate visible. I'm not real keen on that, and I'll just put the pitch in for the community. It gives you one thing, it blocks some visibility, but one thing that a thief and someone who's lurking about thrives on is in the dark and not visible. So I would say you wouldn't want that in your community, quite frankly. And then I guess the last thing is, yeah, it is a problem that's unique, and I recognize that perhaps even as much as I'm reluctant to say, there were some requests that were made by your company going into this particular site, and I know that a lot of us actually, if you will, missed the opportunity to try to figure out how to best fit and put parking. I mean, my only comparison is Moose's Tooth,
right,
where people are still parking in the street that been there, and they've expanded their parking infinitely. So.
Right, and I do think that sorry, but I do think that there needs to be some signs put up on approaching some stoplights. There's been some parking. I put some cones up, which I know is probably not the right thing to do, but I put cones up because it just needed to happen. And if it kept people from parking and blocking the streets so people can see coming in and out of 29th or in and out of 30th, well, we just did it. So.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gravel, first of all, I'd like to thank you for reaching out and taking the time to meet with me, Mr. Trainey, Mr. Steele, and Ms. Russell, based on some of the suggestions that she had written down. I really appreciate that. And I really believe that you're trying really hard to work with the community. And we heard about the meeting on Sunday, and that's another effort. And I have a whole list of things that you're already going to stated that you would do. But my question to you is, what's your thoughts on reducing the size of the lot?
Well, I guess I don't know if it can be done, because I've heard that there's some minimum requirements by the municipality for conditional use. I don't know if I have all the right terms. Right. Conditional use parking has a minimum size, and I can't speak on that. Right. So long as we can make a significant impact, then I have no issue with that. I mean, honestly, it's less money to me, or out of my pocket.
Right.
So
I'll follow up, okay?
Sure.
So what you're saying, I believe, is that if you can reduce the size of the lot, that you have no issue with it.
Sure.
Okay, and we'll talk about that during debate. But thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson. Mr. Gravel, I see no further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome, sir.
Hi, my name, is Dale Gardner. I live about a stone's throw from the Rustic Goat, in case you want to know. I've been living with, for a little over 18 years. I purchased my place as a duplex because it had a park behind it. And at one time, that park had a sign that said it was municipal land. I don't know why it was taken down. The Rustic Goat, yes, it's a beautiful building. When it first was coming in, it was told it was a coffee shop. Then planning got changes. It went to a large restaurant, now a restaurant with a bar. And now the city offers them parking area, which, it makes one wonder if there's some collusion between the developers and the city. It's so convenient. I know they're talking about safety, but my concern is that we wait, that this is being rushed. Jernigan Street is very busy street. It has no sidewalks, and it's needed them for over 20 years, but I have not seen the city rush to put sidewalks in there. And I see kids, even in the winter, having to walk literally in the street because of snow blocking the sides, because there's very little shoulder there. And we don't have sidewalks, but we're rushing because of the concern of the safety of some adults going to a place, that we're going to hurry and pave over the park. And I just don't understand it. Mr. Gravel has said that they expected about 1/3 the business. And it is very busy right now, as most new places are. It's hip, it's the place to go. That will change. So why should we make decisions now when things will not be the same next year? We should see what's going to happen, see where the business is next year, and then make some decisions instead of rushing into things now. And there are questions. I've seen the plans for the parking area, and I know they want to build a rail and keep people from walking the street, but if they're placing it right next to the alley, the way it is designed right now, people will not walk over They just don't. They take the shortest distance from A to B, and they're not going to walk over to the light. They're going to walk to the alley and cross at the alley, and there still will be jaywalking there. There's other concerns with the way the parking is set up. It needs to be looked at. That park has been used over the 18 years plus that have been there. Neighborhood kids I've watched grow up using that area. So it's not spectacularly busy, but it has been used by them and dog walkers and others. And so it's really odd that we take what's supposed to be a neighborhood business, we want to put a parking lot which only encourages people to drive from other parts of the city to park there. And the one last thing, no, the parking lot, even if it's open to others, isn't going to help anybody because we hadn't had a parking issue beforehand.
Thank you very much, sir. I see no questions. I appreciate you coming down.
Okay, and if there were questions, I'd be happy to answer on why there are problems with that parking lot setup.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, sir.
Bob Curtis Johnson, most of you, I addressed you before on this issue. I was a member of the 35th and McRae Neighbors for a Safe Community. We had a similar situation some time back with the city. There was a group of folks, a process had gone through the community council. Neighbors were upset. We came to the assembly. At that time, Mayor Begich stood up and said, let's sit down and discuss this. My concern about this issue is that the whole community in that area has not been part of the solution. And first thing I did after the assembly met last time was to go and talk to folks in a 2-block radius around this. And I just asked them, what do you think about the parking? And my experience of that was about 60%, 66%, roughly 2/3 said, you know, we don't need a parking lot. We don't want the park gone. We just want the parking issue decreased. And after I talked to Tim about a month ago, we had a good long discussion, I thought. He put cones out several days later. The issue disappeared almost overnight. The safety issue, Ms. Dombrowski, went away literally within several hours and stayed away for almost a month. It came back right after this went right back on your docket. Boom, it was up. And I have to say that looks like manipulation. But if safety can be resolved that quickly, then we can resolve this issue simply by distributing the parking in the neighborhoods. We do not need to take the park. And I would just say this is a dense neighborhood already. We have people in 8-plexes, 6-plexes, 12-plexes. They need their parks nearby. Single mothers came and joined us picketing. So the park is, I've always felt the park should be the last solution. Let's sign this. I would ask the mayor to do that. Let's sign these streets. Let's not make the park the first sacrificial goat in this situation.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis Johnson. I see no questions.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening. Welcome, ma'am.
Kathy MacArthur. Have lived in Turnagain area over 20 years, spend a lot of time at the goat, I guess you could say that. Granddaughter for coffee in the morning, husband for wine at night. In probably the 20-some times I visited there, I observed to the east, knowing that there was a parking lot being contemplated, and never saw a dog walk through there, never saw children playing in there. I'm not saying that they don't, because I don't live across the street from there, but in the numerous times I've been there, I have never, ever seen anybody use that area. If a parking lot should go in there, my request would be that the north side is pretty well buffered from the street with trees and shrubs, is that the same thing would occur on the south side of the parking lot with the shrubs so that it fits in more with the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, ma'am. I see.
I don't see the goat going away, so I know this issue needs to be resolved. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much. Welcome back, sir.
Yes, thank you.
You get to introduce yourself again, though. Sorry.
Excuse me?
You get to introduce yourself again, though.
Yeah, I should say 6, 7. No, I guess I'm here for the sake of continuity and context because, you know, when we started this process, there's a process. And there's a process that people like myself as the developer of the project, you know, when we started it, you know, it was created based on an initial groundswell that started in the neighborhood. So when the community of Turnagain was looking at the long-term, you know, land use, they put a big star on that site and said, this is where we want commercial. And so I integrated that with what was going on within the planning department because we've got, I saw in the paper recently, 18,000 too few residential units. So I've drank the mixed-use Kool-Aid, saying that what we need to do is create better quality density in this town. So I worked with the community, I worked with the assembly, I worked with the planning staff to come up with a prototype to work. So clearly, it's become incredibly popular. So we're going to learn from these experiences, but the best solution right now to deal with the pressure created by the parking is the parking lot across the street. I see that. So it's been suggested there was some collusion. There's no collusion. There's been nothing but collaboration. And I got to admit, the person who I've appreciated the most, I think, through this whole public process is Vicky. It's like I walked up to Vicky just now just to pat her on the shoulder, and she just kind of pulled away from me. And I was like, going, you know what? This is my neighbor. This is somebody who's participated in the process that I appreciate. So she might have been, the one abstaining vote out of the 14, but she participated. And for someone like me that's putting my family's savings on the line, I got to know that I can rely on this process and then rely on another way to have a community solution to it. And I do think that the parking lot across the street, the way that Tim does it, is, he's been a perfect partner in the sense that he is sensitive to the community and what he builds and the quality of what he builds. So that's why this has become an exception that I hope doesn't continue to be an exception, that it becomes an inspiration for more of these projects to happen around Anchorage and for more people to try it. But they got to be able to rely on this process and realize that, we're not going to get blindsided down the road. So anyway, hopefully, we get the parking approved. And if you have any questions, let me know.
I'm sorry, sir. I just need you, for the record, to state your name.
Oh, James Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Hey, Mr. Brady.
CB Brady. I'm the developer or the contractor of the restaurant, but I was born on Lusac Drive in the 70s. I had my bike stolen from the Quick Stop across the street. I went to get gas gum at the Chevron. I got my hair cut at Ray's for 11 years. I know the neighborhood pretty well. And until some friends of ours, Mr. Flynn, tried to race the railroad, there wasn't a underpass at that time. And at that time, those lots were zoned to be developed for zero lot line housing. When the underpass of the railroad went through, it got changed into somewhat of a right-of-way green space. Although there's still some messy little business going on, I see nothing better than supporting this restaurant and the locals of getting the cars off the streets and onto a parking lot. Better a parking lot than a bunch of zero lot line housing. Andre Spinelli's not here, but I think he would be all in favor for that. I witnessed over 2.5 years working on that job how many people were in the so-called park. And frankly, it would be better served as parking. I also can say, as the board president of Alaska Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired, as someone who has a degenerative eye disease with a visual impairment, there's nothing worse than cars lining down a roadway. So safety-wise, as everybody has said, it's a big deal. As far as the pedestrian control, if we, like Red said, put the parking down at the end of the alley, what better way for people to jaywalk at the alley? This parking lot directs them to Northern Lights and Turnagain Street with a paved drive or a paved walk, with a pedestrian railway that they can't cross, and it'll put most of them right to where they're supposed to cross. Will it get everybody? Of course not. But it'll get the people that care about safety. And that's what we're trying to do, help out a great community restaurant. What better way to invigorate the locals than a little commerce? And I don't think that should be looked at negatively. I think this is a positive thing. These guys are coming out of pocket to build a thing that they don't have to. They did everything within the municipal, state, local, federal code. And here we are arguing about whether or not they should do it or not. They're paying out of their pockets. I mean, they don't have to do anything, and the problem's still there. So I am in favor of this parking lot, and I hope I get to build it also. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Before you run off,
Ready?
CB? Hey. You did not get released.
I'd like to walk away and go, drop the microphone.
Mr. Honum has a question for you, and Ms. Lance, I apologize. We only have people.
First of all, I hope you're keeping your brother busy. The other is, do you know if there, and I might have missed it, will this parking lot and the paved area walkway, will that be lit by chance? Will be lighting at all?
We have to, as contractors, pass the MOA standards of lighted ways. So if it's not, we have to add lighting. If it doesn't currently get enough lighting, we have to add lighting.
Thank you.
And there's no current fence planned. It's just a split rail system right now.
Very good. Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Now I can drop the mic?
Now you can sit down.
All right.
Hi, my name's Anna Plum, Plumb. I'm the general manager of the Rustic Goat. Forgive me, I'm not used to speaking in public, usually just more one-on-one with people. Being a general manager, I have seen every side of this issue. I am pretty much the face of it on a daily basis, whether it be the APD, whether it be the residents, our owners, guests in our restaurant. I am a firm believer in executing the utmost diplomacy in situations, which is my job on a daily basis. It's been interesting to me with the meeting that we had on Sunday with the residents, just stating everything that I hear. Most of the residents, a lot of their complaints are traffic in the neighborhood. A lot of their complaints were lack of sidewalks, lack of proper road size. I feel that the Rustic Goat is not really responsible for those types of issues. We're just there. We're a neighborhood restaurant. We're a community living room. We like to embrace all aspects of the community. I understand the residents' frustrations. I understand the frustrations of people that want to preserve the land that is there. And I understand the frustrations of our guests not finding parking. With all that being said, the point is that the situation is at hand. I think that we should move forward in learning to coexist and solve the problem. A lot of people voice their concerns about what they are upset about, and I really think that we need to bring to fruition a solution to this problem. I think the parking lot would reduce the amount of traffic in the neighborhood, which is along 29th Street, which is mainly the issue, which is also, I believe, an emergency route. I think it would pull it out of the neighborhood and concentrate it more where it needs to be. That being said, Tim Gravel did provide us in the restaurant with some slips of paper that were stating residents their ability to write their name and email or address in support. Those are the packets that were submitted to you. I don't know if there's any clarification onto what that was. But those are our patrons that we simply just put in our guest checkbooks. No words were really said. It was the patron's option whether or not they wanted to fill those out. So just to clarify what you had received. I guess that's all I really have to say on the issue, and we just really want to work with a solution for making everyone happy. It would make my job a little bit easier to see some happy faces and be able to work with people like Vicki and who I got to meet yesterday or on Sunday. Let's work towards solving a problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming down. Ms. Gleason, welcome back.
Thank you. My name is Kathy Gleason, and I was president when the Turnagain Crossing development first came before the Turnagain Community Council about 2 to 3 years ago. And there are some things I wanted to address specifically. The size of the parking lot was brought up. And after we voted to support the proposed project at our June meeting, which included this many spaces, and I heard a lot of testimony in July before this body, I kind of questioned whether we needed something that big. So I think it is valid to maybe look at that a little closer and see if we can't reduce the size. That would reduce the amount of green space that would be taken up, and it would reduce the amount of traffic that would go in and out of that alley using that lot. So it's something to consider. The retention of the existing vegetation, a neighbor emailed me with some information with regard to municipal code and feels like the clear vision area, part of that code would require some vegetation removal, so I'd like some clarification from the powers that be on whether that in fact would have to be the case. With regard to the testimony on fencing in the parking lot, I agree with Assembly Honeman. That didn't sound like a good idea to me. I think high visibility in that area is essential, based on the fact that there have been people that told me when I was president that the existing municipal lot down farther east in that alley, there's a lot of bad stuff that goes on there in the middle of the night. So I think that's the last thing you'd want to consider requiring Mr. Gravel and company to do with that lot. With regard to a sidewalk on Turnagain Street, Turnagain Community Council has identified that that is a huge issue, and we have for quite a few years. Every year we send in our CIP ranking, project ranking list, and Turnagain Street improvements are the top or one of the top projects consistently. We were told by CRW and the Muni when they went through a process a couple of years ago with regard to Turnagain Street and Turnagain Boulevard. Both are terrible, both need a lot of help, but Turnagain Boulevard is before Turnagain Street from their perspective, so that's how it's ranked in our current CIP because of huge drainage issues. But wouldn't it be nice if maybe with a lot of arm twisting from this body and from the administration that we could get funding to do both in a phase 1, phase 2, rather than piecemeal them when we might get funding for each one separately. That would help a lot. And the sidewalk that was put in because of the rustic goat, what is there, I think has improved the situation to the extent that it can be improved. I just have one more thing to add.
10 seconds, come on.
I appreciate it. I briefly touched on this when I testified in July. I want to emphasize again that what you have before you, what rustic goat is now, is a direct result of Turnagain Community Council input. It was originally proposed as a coffee shop, as others have said. When JJ came to our meeting and proposed, first he met with the board during the summer, then he came to our fall council meeting, talked about the proposal. He got a lot of feedback from those who attend our council meetings regularly. We want something more than just a quick in, quick out, create lots of traffic in the mornings kind of thing off West Northern Lights and then at the intersection of Turnagain Street. We'd like some place where people can go all day long into the evening, have something to eat, still looked at it as a neighborhood destination. I guess we didn't realize what we were asking for would be so popular. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gleason. I thought I saw one or two poor people. Ms. Russell, you don't have to be the last word. It's okay. Good to see you again, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Vicki Russell, R-U-S-S-E-L-L, and I spoke to you at the July meeting, and I have been attending Turnagain Community Council since the Rusty Goat opened. I also testified at Planning and Zoning 2.5 years ago against the restaurant being built because I saw the problems that have now happened. I have been very vocal about my dislike of the restaurant, and as a matter of fact, spent 8 days outside the restaurant with picket signs recently. And I have been meeting at meetings with several of you and with Mr. Gravel, and I finally came to the conclusion that the restaurant, as much as I wanted it to, was not going to go away, and that it maybe was better to try to work with them. And I supplied you with some possible solutions to the problem in the July meeting. And I was very impressed by Mr. Gravel wanting to come to me and talk to me about that along with some of you. I feel very bad about saying that it seems like the parking lot is the only solution. And there's two reasons for that. One is because I really feel for my neighbors. I don't think I would like it very much if somebody decided to put a parking lot in my backyard. And that's what's happening to those people on 29th Street east of Turnagain Street. I also am worried about the safety in the jaywalking, and I don't like seeing green space taken over. I don't particularly want to drive into my neighborhood every day and see a big, huge parking lot full of cars. That's not why I came to my neighborhood. Please remember that our neighborhood was zoned residential before this restaurant was put in. And that leads me to my final point, which is I don't know how you're going to fulfill what Title Project 21 is, but our neighborhood is the test place, and frankly, it was a disaster. And somebody has to understand that a place with no sidewalks, with very, very seldom snow removal, and with lots of people who like to drive very fast when it should be 25 miles an hour, is not a place to put a restaurant. I hope that the city will continue to work with us to put signage up in our neighborhood, to put signage up to keep people from parking right up to the corners and to keep people from speeding on residential streets, which is happening over and over and over again. So I really challenge you to find a way to solve these problems before you inflict this on someone else's neighborhood.
Thank you very much, Ms. Russell. We appreciate you coming down. I see no questions.
Okay.
Welcome, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Carol Del Valle, spelled Delvalle, and I'm just speaking as a concerned citizen. I've listened to all the testimony today and had my own previous notions about that area, have friends in the area and also visited the restaurant there. Similar to the gentleman that enjoys donuts, I also enjoy pizza and beer and good food, and have noted that, yes, indeed, the Rustic Goat does provide that. I was dismayed, first of all, with the planning of this restaurant, thinking, first, it's a cafe, maybe that parking space would have been adequate, but looking at the number of seats in that restaurant and the number of parking spaces, I can't imagine how you would ever even think that's going to work in terms of space. So now that it's there and you're dealing with lots of parking issues, I'm again dismayed that you're turning to a green space that maybe is not designated as a park, but it is a place that is used as a park with kids and dog walkers, and maybe it's not frequent or always seen, but it's a green place for the neighborhood. It is a dense neighborhood if you've ever been there, and working with children myself, I know that even having green places around is important for their development. The solution, I know, that is that you're all trying to find today, and there's so many issues just listening to all the little pieces to it. I don't think that you can just go in and say, here's the answer, we're going to pave this spot. And apparently there's an ordinance that it has to be 28 spaces big, which is huge. It takes up a huge area in that green area there. And I don't know if that size could be reduced or reconfigured, but there's other areas around there that perhaps could be used as parking. I just think it needs more time to be analyzed and to look at the data about how many people are visiting the restaurant and how many parking places are actually needed before you go in and put 28 pave 28 parking spaces before you figure out what is actually needed.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Down. Anybody else who wishes to speak to us on this matter? Seeing, hearing no one. Playing possum. Come on.
My name is Carrie Campbell, Campbell. I live in the Turnagain area. It is exactly 1 mile from the Rustic Goat parking lot to my garage. We have timed it a number of times. My husband and I are probably one of their most frequent eaters. We have spent over $5,000 at that restaurant since they opened. I'm a little embarrassed to say that out loud and on record. I guess I have mixed emotions about this. We obviously love the restaurant and love what it's brought to our neighborhood. We see many friends. I am a small business owner myself. I see a lot of my clients there. It's a great place to just meet your neighbors and enjoy something that's close to home. I understand the problem, and I appreciate what the neighbors that are living very close to that restaurant are experiencing. However, I was very disturbed by the number of picketers that were outside, blaming it on the restaurant. I guess my point is that they lease that space from the developers, so if there's an issue, it really lies in the developer creating that location. The city approved it, and yet the restaurant is being blamed for it, and I don't think it's all the restaurant's fault. It's never nice to fault someone for their success. I would like to see a solution, perhaps a parking lot with a fewer spaces that would make everyone happy. The few times that my husband and I parked in that small municipal area within the green section, and we walked across that grass, there was a tremendous amount of dog waste that was left there. I'm a doggy daycare owner, and I'm really picky about people cleaning up after their pets. And if you're going to have a green space and call it a place where you can take your dog, then you should at least respect that space and clean up after your pet. So that's my thought. I hope that the city can come to a solution and that it doesn't penalize anyone in a great way.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. I think Mr. Steele has a question for you.
Actually not. I just wanted to make sure I was in a queue for afterwards.
No worries. All right, Ms. Campbell, thank you for coming down. You're free to go. Anybody else? All right. Now the public hearing is closed. What is
Move approval.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Mr. Steele, you are in queue.
All right. I came to this process a little bit late. It was already under construction, and let me say out front, you're all right. There's a huge problem, and I think the city has to take a little bit of the blame, but we were trying to see how we could encourage multi-use development. And so to say you guys were the guinea pig is not quite fair, but when I did come by after the restaurant opened, I was really appalled by the situation, because it really is an unsafe situation. Vicky's comments at that time, there was snow on the ground, and on 29th, she had cars rushing down there. She had cars parking on the end so that she couldn't come out the Turnagain side because there was no visibility. Safety issues. To a certain extent, I don't totally blame the development in that in the course of their development, they did run into some problems that made them move the building because of a communications fault, and they lost two or three parking spaces in the process. 2 or 3 parking spaces that would not have solved the problem. It's a very successful business. I certainly don't fault Kaladi because it's being successful. There has to be a solution. Right now, the neighborhood's in a bit of a fix because they're working on 35th and McRae and that neck of the woods, and so the area is kind of blocked off anyway. There is a project in the plan to redo Turnagain Street. I'm told that will be 2-lane street with a sidewalk on one side, and hopefully, I think we've got it in the plan for 15 or 16 when we get funding for it. But the restaurant didn't come to us and say, "Hey, can we pave over Paradise?" as somebody said in an email. And solve our problem on the backs of the city. We were looking for solutions, and JJ was right when he said, or it may have been Tim, I don't know, but when he said the city came to him and said, "Hey, this may be something that we can consider. The vegetation is supposed to stay. Whether it can be less than 28 lots, I really would like to have the city, or 28 parking spaces to address. I know that's divided up into parcels, and maybe one less parcel could give them something, and it could be expanded should that not work. But I like that idea. You can't see that from Turnagain, except through a little hole, one part of it. The vegetation is supposed to stay. I wouldn't want a fence either. The vegetation hopefully works as a barrier. But it's not an easy solution. And we've looked at a lot of solutions. And so, I'm hoping that we find a way to solve that problem. And at some point, I'd like the city to give me an idea as to whether or not less parking is feasible.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a bit of a housekeeping point before any other comments. I was hoping that we could append the C that was part of the original packet that came to us in July, reflecting the income created by the lease to the owners of the Rustic Goat. It wasn't part of our packet this time, and I don't think that economics have changed. I think we can just append that C to it.
Will you please press your button, sir?
Second.
Is there objection to appending the C from AO 2014-83 to this particular ordinance? Please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. Mr. Steele? Oh. Okay. And Mr. Evans, just to clarify, that was a motion to incorporate, not to append. My mistake in either direction. Okay, so the C is incorporated into the ordinance in front of us. That brings us to Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a number of questions for the administration. I'm not sure exactly who I should address or who you'd like to have answer these questions. Mr. Vacalis?
We'll let Mr. Vacalis be our gatekeeper.
Well, look, the first thing, that I want to really be clear about is immediately following the opening, we heard from a number of members of the neighborhood about the issue. Mr. Steele and I met with the city manager within a week of the opening, and he acknowledged the problem. The police were dealing with it, and they began looking for solutions. So this is something that has taken a while, and indeed, the solution that was arrived at by the city, not the Rustic Goat, and the city made the approach to suggest that this appeared to be the logical solution. But my question is, and I just want to get this in the record, what's the term of the lease? How long?
3 years. 2 options. 3 years, 2 options.
It's 3 years, and it does have renewal clauses in it.
For 2 more 3-year terms.
Yes.
So it could be for up to 9 years.
Yes.
And how much is the lease?
So in the SCE, if I remember correctly, it shows $3,000 annual for the remainder of this year, and then $8,000 a year for the rest of the term lease. So, if it's 3 years, it would be $3,000 plus 2 years of $8,000 each.
8,000. I've just done a rough math. That's someplace between 50 and 60 cents a square foot.
Yes, and I would say that, what we do is, unless we get dispensation from the assembly or unless there is some type of mutual benefit from both parties, we basically charge fair market value for our leases.
Right.
And this was fair market value.
That's what I would assume it is. And who's going to pay for all the improvements on this project?
All of the improvements will be paid for by the owners of the Rustic Goat.
Okay, and I'm assuming they as well are responsible for the total maintenance of this?
They're responsible for snow removal. They're responsible also for making sure that proper vegetation is in there. They're also responsible for making sure that adequate lighting exists. They're responsible for the trail that basically leads out of the parking lot that goes to the intersection, so it marries up with the bona fide crosswalk. As they stated today, which is not in the agreement, but obviously we will be modifying the agreement. But as they had stated today, and we'll work with them, they'll put in some type of a buffer, as I understand it, to basically make it difficult for folks to deviate from the path. The other thing is, even though in the current unsigned agreement, and the reason it's not signed at this moment is because we wanted to make sure we understood what the full ramifications and what the Assembly's final approval was. So that's why the agreement has not been orchestrated as of yet. So if there is other issues that are of concern to the Assembly, then certainly this would be the time to convey what those are. For example, Mr. Trainee had indicated earlier on tonight, but he also had asked me a question about towing. And as I had gotten back to Mr. Trainee, and as I stated publicly earlier, that the way that it's currently written, they have exclusive use, which means that if they so chose to allow others to park there, then they could certainly do so. By the same token, if they chose to basically ensure that their investment was protected from the standpoint of allowing and ensuring that they have adequate parking for their restaurant, they could also restrict that parking lot to just patrons of the restaurant. But if they did so, of course, they'd have to have proper signage and they'd have to follow whatever the code calls for as far as notice and then obviously removing of the vehicles from that private lot. And I say private lot because even though we own it, it would be under their management authority.
It was brought up earlier this evening about us setting a precedent with this lease. I believe you can enlighten us to the fact that the city has a lot of leases all over the city with different entities.
We have leases throughout the city with private entrepreneurs. We have leases with nonprofits. We have leases with other government entities throughout the city.
And Mr. Vakelos, I'd asked you specifically, and you shared with me, but I would like for you to share with the body in regards to the parking restrictions and the parking signs. You've had enforcement, another number of people go out and validate and check that?
Yes, sir. Because of the distance between the intersection and where the restaurant is located, what was happening was there was actually people parking right adjacent to the intersection going down both sides of the road. And obviously because of the narrow width of the road, plus it's a major intersection turning into there, no parking signs were placed. They were basically, we went back several times because we had heard that there was no parking signs there. We validated that no parking signs, in fact, were there. And obviously, if there's no parking signs there, and if they were sanctioned by the city, which they were, then obviously enforcement action can be taken against anyone that parks there illegally, because they were posted by the traffic engineer. Therefore, they are legal no parking signs. The extent of that basically went from the intersection down the road just prior to the alley in question.
Thank you. One more quick question. We've had discussion about the alley a couple of times this evening. What will happen to the alley in the development of the parking lot down there? Will there be any upgrade to the alley?
It will be an improved alley.
It'll be an improved alley. I guess I'd follow up with a question of, could you tell me what that means?
It would be paved.
It would be paved. Okay. Thank you. The only other comment I have, Mr. Chairman, and I really appreciate your indulgence, is, we've had discussion about maybe cutting the project in half here. One of the things that I really don't want to see happen over there is us going out and posting no parking signs in areas that currently aren't regulated that way. I see that as a disservice to the community. It's not a lot of times, but during holidays and other things, people living along that street have a lot of guests, and they need to have that parking available to them. And unfortunately, we can't restrict no parking just to people that patronize that restaurant. If we go in there and limit the parking, then we're doing a disservice to the community, I believe, as a whole. And the other thing is, I really think this is a project we need to do. I encourage us not to think about cutting it in half. The owners are going to absorb a tremendous bill to improve this project, and if we go in there and do half of it and then decide, well, that's not enough, we really should do the other half, the cost impact is pretty great on that. So I would ask for the body to support this as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Mr. Honeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start with a couple of observations. And one is Ms. Russell's observation, very eloquently spoken, is both poignant with some, regrets, if you will, for some of the comments, but she's very obviously visionary because she foresaw some of these things before the project even took place, and pointed as well. Some of the comments earlier on, and I'd asked last time at the public hearings, were there other options? And I do believe that diagonal parking along the alley access, were it to be improved and widened just a bit, that alley might have gained some parking spaces, perhaps not 28, but the best example I can give you on that is the Park Strip downtown, where they've put a lot of diagonal parking in along with a sidewalk. And speaking of sidewalks, we've heard a lot of that, paving, upgrades, and sidewalks. And this just goes to serve as a reminder to my colleagues as well as the development community, and that is the opportunity to develop streets and perhaps in redevelopment to upgrade. We're just burdened with requests from collector status streets, such as that one that goes down Turnagain, that gets into other parts of the subdivision, and there's not even one sidewalk, whereas some neighborhoods like Fairview and downtown and even as much as Airport Heights and Grandview Gardens have alley access and sidewalks on both sides of the street, and believe me, it makes a difference on pedestrian walkability as well as I think some value in the neighborhoods. So how Turnagain became one of those communities that didn't have the requirements from the Title 21 at that time, or the developers required to do such, and that's largely where it's at. If the city doesn't build the infrastructure, the developers, as they're going, are required to do that. And either they were able to get a waiver from it, or it wasn't in the code at the time or not. But Title 21 puts a lot of restrictions on developers. Developers know that costs money, which means they have to pass it along to the buyers, and then that's where we end up with, if you want to look at it from that perspective, affordable housing. So I don't recommend the fence, and I stated that from earlier. I don't want to repeat that too much. But I guess one of the questions that I have is to the municipal manager is if they're going to, if the Rustic Goat or the owner of the developers, if they're leasing this municipal land and they're paying what looks like to be $666 a month just on the lease, not to mention the lighting, of course, the maintenance and any signage and upkeep. Can they charge for parking in that parking lot? Would they be allowed to charge for parking?
As I remember reading the draft agreement, it's not mentioned.
Okay. Well, I guess wouldn't be excluded. I'm not saying that they would, but that was a question I had. And then I will offer an amendment, a proposed amendment to, I believe Mr. Trainee might have one as well when we get to that point. But it hasn't gone without notice that, of course, this is if you will, pilot project on mixed-use development. I recall with fondness when we had a very nice restaurant down the street from where I lived. It was within walking distance, and I patronized a couple of times a week. I eat out a lot, unfortunately. But O'Brady's, when they moved to the south, and the only thing that moved in down there at Tudor Molding Curve is a coffee shop. And yeah, it's great if I want a chocolate or hot chocolate or coffee, but we lost that ability to do dining down there. And so I envy you in a lot of ways actually, because it seems to be a very popular restaurant. I'll go back to the Moose's Tooth analogy. I remember how small the footprint was of that place, and look at it now. And I don't know if you'll be successful and continue. I hope you do. But if you don't, there's also another thing that I'd like to consider in my amendment. So, thanks.
Are you making a motion, sir?
I have an amendment, but I think Mr. Trainee had one.
All right, we'll get to that.
So mine is numbered.
We'll come back to you. Ms. Johnston.
I just wanted to clear up a couple of Title 21 questions, Mr. Weaver. First of all, because it was asked as far as the size of the parking lot, could you explain the size?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Johnson, there's no minimum size required.
So they could do a varying size.
They could vary in size. When we first discussed this with them, it was felt the 28 would mitigate the parking in the other surrounding streets, the neighborhood streets, and in total would hopefully get the customer parking off those streets and in the parking lot. And that's kind of the observation. The number could include employees. It could free up the other parking area to the east that's presently used by employees, and the parking tandem in there as well.
My other question is, and I'm going on memory, but I think parking could be gravel.
Parking is required to be paved, Ms. Johnson.
Is it at this point? It has to be a conditional use to be gravel?
It does have to be paved. The code requires it to be paved. The water quality, it impacts all those things. And we've looked at the drainage off-site to properly accept the water coming off this site, and it needs to be paved.
It always doesn't make sense to me because gravel is so much more porous. But okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a little amendment. I'll pass it out. Take one, pass it down to it. I've got a concern with parking. I think we've all been to the Moose's Tooth more than once or got calls. Constituents have been told for the Moose's Tooth. I hope this is successful. I don't want to create the same parking problem we've got over there. It's one simple amendment. The purpose of the amendment is to ensure responsible party is designated to provide tow signage for parking lot. Page 2, line 18, the property interest permitted by Midnight Mood Company, Inc., under this ordinance shall be considered subject to provisions of AMC Chapter 9.54 towing procedures. Midnight Moon Company, Inc. shall provide the required signage and shall comply with the provisions of AMC Chapter 9.54.
Second.
Would you please press your button, sir? Mr. Dombowski. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion of the amendment? Mr. Evans, you have a question on the amendment?
Yeah, if Mr. Trainee could just tell me what, not having AMC Chapter 9.54 in front of me and not taking the time to read it, if you could just tell me what this will mean as far as the owners
It just
go.
means that if they decide to tow from that lot, and that's up to them, because they're going to have ownership of the lot, they've got to comply with the chapter that deals with the required signage and the notification of the tow company and the number to call if your vehicle's towed. Because when you look at where this lot's going to go, there are no phones around there. Nobody has pay phones anymore. And it's a pretty isolated area. I just don't want somebody to come out and find their car gone and not know who took their car. This requires them to have signage there that states who took it and the number you can call to get your car back. And we're dealing with the whole issue of towing in the next couple of months because we have problems in this town with towing. But at least want to take care of this lot. And I'm more than happy to join with my colleagues to approve this. I just want to get this in there first to protect the customers. That's all.
Is there any further comments on the amendment? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote on amendment number 1. Mr. Starr.
I don't know.
And that amendment is approved unanimously. That brings us to Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And several of my questions have been answered, but something that was mentioned by one of the neighbors, that they had solved the problem by putting some cones up around the restaurant to restrict parking. And I was wondering, where were those cones put up And could you give us some more information about that? Because maybe that might be where we might want to make sure that we have no parking signs permanently put up.
Bob Curtis Johnson. I was out there for almost 2 weeks on a nightly basis, and the cones were just on Turnagain. And within an hour or two of them going up, there was no parking, and it stayed that way. And the load that moved on to 29th was not huge. It was 7-8 cars, really. And so my concern of 28 parking spaces being needed, it doesn't seem to argue for that. It seems like we could have some resident-only parking, maybe some permitted resident-only parking in the surrounding.
The question's answered. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Appreciate that. Mr. Peterson, do you have another question?
And how far down Turnagain did they put the cones? Was it past the alley all the way to 29?
Almost to 28.
Almost all the way to 29?
I'm sorry, 29th. Yeah.
Okay.
No, 30th.
30th.
Yep. Thanks.
On the west side of Turnagain Street, 30th.
Okay.
About one property short.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Thank you, Mr. Curtis Johnson. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My only comment was going to be the suggestion of making the space smaller, and I think Mr. Weaver already said that was possible, and also Mr. Gravel said that he had no issue with it, so I just wanted to bring that issue up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Mr. Honeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make an amendment as well, be titled Section 6. However, I'm not sure after what's the line number now that Amendment 5 is passed and we have a new amendment, Section 6.
How about just following Section 5?
Following Section 5. So amended be under Section 6, and you see I passed it out, but should this land use permit of approximately 11,000 square feet or any portion thereof be discontinued for any reason, the discontinued site lots shall be remediated to their natural condition as they existed prior to the permit.
Mr. Honeman, will you please press your button?
Yes, that's my amendment.
Is there a second? Seeing and hearing no second, the motion fails. Ms. Domboski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought here. I just want to make a couple comments. First, I made the long trek all the way to the Rustic Goat, and I actually drove down there the day that the cones were out. I don't know which day it was, I don't recall, but I was thinking maybe the municipality put them out because it was not too long after the assembly meeting, and it seemed to be an effective solution too. So my question is to Mr. Vacalis. Previously we had talked about putting signage up there. What is the municipality doing in that regard, and what steps have been taken? If I've missed this, I'm sorry, but could you answer that for me?
Sure. So currently, parking is authorized on that street and has been for years. In fact, residents do park on the street. The issue at hand was the safety involved near the intersection. That's where the traffic engineer determined that legally, no parking signs could be placed there. That's why they were placed where they are currently setting. The cones were illegally placed and have no force of law whatsoever.
Yeah, but they got the job done. Just saying.
Don't get me started explaining parking zones to you, Ms. Domboski. We don't have all night.
Oh, you don't need to. You don't need to. The other thing I want to say, I've heard a lot of people make comments about how we're assisting one business. I look at it a little differently. Though this might benefit one business, this business is willing to put in a lot of their money, which they don't have to do, to help alleviate the problem, which, granted, was created because they're so successful. But I look at this, and I will not deviate from this position. Our fundamental role is to ensure the public safety. And one woman that testified last time, and I forgive me because I don't remember her name, but I remember her talking about trying to pull out every single time, and it's like she had to completely do this creep before she could see if she could go or not. I mean, it's a scary situation. And so, yes, this may end up assisting a business, but it's also ensuring the public safety. And this isn't a freebie. This isn't a giveaway. They are having to invest a lot of their own money, and they're having to pay fair market value. So from a municipal asset standpoint, we're managing our asset for the best use of the public. And that it's not a park now. Everybody keeps saying it's a park. It's not a park. It may be used as one. People may bring their dogs there to do their business, but it's not a municipal park. So I just want to be very clear about that. And for these reasons, and because public safety is our number one concern, this is a logical step. So I will support it. I'm concerned about shrinking the size of the number of parking spots because what I don't want is to have to come back in a year and a half and do this all over again. I would rather, 28 spots does not, I think that's how many it is, isn't it? Yeah, 28 spots doesn't seem, it's not 150. It doesn't seem irrational. It seems very logical to me. So I will support this as written, as amended, and I hope the body will do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be brief as this is just a sort of variation on what Ms. Domboski just said. But since it was brought up by a lot of the public comments, I do want to address the fact that I at least do not view this in any sense as being a benefit provided by the municipality to the Rustic Goat. From all the evidence I have heard and all these hearings and everything else I've seen, the Rustic Goat's doing fine without us. All their customers are finding a way to get there without us having a parking lot. And I presume they will still get there. And Rustic Goat will still be enjoying a booming business if we don't do this. What I see is, this came up because there were tons of complaints coming from the neighborhood about the parking situation that was caused after the restaurant opened. This was an attempt by the municipality not to benefit the Rustic Goat, but to solve a problem in the neighborhood. And granted, it's not pleasing to everyone in the neighborhood. It's, somebody, I think the store manager for Rustic Goat said that she wants, hopes we can have a solution that makes everyone happy. I know that's not going to happen. But I do think that this is a part of a solution. I thought it made sense last month. I think even more so this month after what I've heard. But I do want to dispel the notion that this is intended to benefit a certain business. I have the luxury of being able to say that I don't know what everybody was thinking when they put this business in here without, planning perhaps adequately for this parking problem. That's where the problem seems to have arisen, and that happens. It was a new idea, and sometimes things get by people. But, so it's sort of the city's problem, and we've kind of created it. The Rustic Goat has complied with all the zoning ordinances. This is not their problem as I see it. And we have to do something as a municipality, and I think this is a good first step. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Honeman, very briefly, I'm sure.
Yep. To my colleagues, I'm not sure, to the community, I attempted to put my amendment forth for very sound reasons, and that is one of the gentlemen brought up a point that could very much be a possibility, not a probability, but that is, what if this business, for some reasons, failed to exist or didn't do as well in the coming years, decided to sell and relocate because of all the other challenges they might face? So I'm a little concerned that what we're going to do with the parking lot, if this business were to go away and we've paved and we've got something there, and perhaps we'll just enjoy a parking lot on West 29th. So I intend to support it only because, again, I think Mr. Evans summed it up. We're not going to get full satisfaction from everybody in the neighborhood. I'm not particularly happy without having explored other options either, but I think it's a good solution, so I'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. You're on mute, Mr. Starr. Thank you, sir. So by a vote of 11 yeas and 0 nays, that motion carries. That brings us to Item 14H, AO 2014-102, an ordinance authorizing non-exclusive electric easement within Government Lot 1, Section 6, Township 14 North, Range 1 West, Seward Meridian, Alaska. Tax number 050-76204, Anchorage Recording District, 3rd Judicial District, State of Alaska, to Matanuska Electric Association, Incorporated, brought to us by the Public Works Department and Project Management and Engineering Division, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum AM 477-2014. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us about this matter, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move approval.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. Thank you, Mr. Starr. And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 14I, AR 2014-219, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly waiving an alcoholic beverages conditional use for retail sales of alcohol associated with brewery license number 5321 in the I-1 Light Industrial District for Chugach Brewing Company, LLC, doing business as the Chugach Brewing Company at 3024 Mountain View Drive within the Alaska Industrial Subdivision, Block 7, Lot 7A, generally located south of Mountain View Drive and north of the Glen Highway in Anchorage in the Mountain View Community Council area. This is case 2014-0118, brought to us by the Community Development Department. It's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 486-2014. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Come on down, sir. All right. I believe you were at Mountain View Community Council last month.
Yeah, I was. Hi, I'm Brandon Hall, H-A-L-L. I just want to make it known that I'm available for questions. I don't have any comments per se, but I'm the founder and owner of Chugach Brewing Company. Well, / bookkeeper.
Chief cook and bottle washer?
Sure.
Chief cook and bottle washer?
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Honeman has a question for you.
Mr. Hall, and have you spoken to the Community Council about your proposal, and also do you have any intent? I mean, how many employees, I guess, will you have on site?
Sure. So when we reach full capacity, if you will, I have 3 employees, including myself. So I'll be an assistant brewer and a tasting room manager to oversee the operations. In case you don't know, tap rooms attached to breweries that close at 8 o'clock every night with maximum allowance of 36 ounces per customer. So just one person, it's more enough for them to handle. And I did actually go to a community council meeting and introduce myself and talked about the brewery at length in Mountain View, and I was open for any questions, and didn't receive much pushback.
So
I can speak to that when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you.
I see no one else in queue. Mr. Hall, thank you very much for coming down, and thank you for taking the time to visit Mountain View. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Absolutely.
And just for the information of the body, I was in contact with Daniel George, who's the president of Mountain View Community Council. Community Council did hear from Mr. Hall. They did not either object or support. They just acknowledged the information and appreciated it, and now it's with us.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak to us on this matter? Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move approval.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr? And so by a vote of 11 yeas and 0 nays, that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 14J, AR 2014-207, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $242,178 when tendered from the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities and $5,000 as a contribution from the Port of Anchorage and $5,575 as a restricted contribution from various private donations to the state direct.
Wave reading.
Thank you. This is for the freight mobility project for the AMETS carries out every few years. It's been a while. So if you wish to speak to us about that study, please come forward at this time. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed.
Move to approve.
So moved and seconded. Does anyone wish to speak to this matter? In that case, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. And that carries unanimously. That brings us to item 14K, AR 2014-208, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $1,082,068 from the State of Alaska Department of Health and Social Services and $242,982 from the 2014 General Government Operating Budget, Department of Health and Human Services Area-Wide General Fund 101 to the State Direct Federal Pass-Through Grant Fund 231 to fund the Human Services Community Grant Matching Program in the Department of Health and Human Services. It's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 432-2014. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed.
Move to approve.
So moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. And that carries unanimously. That brings us to item 14L, AR 2014-212, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $457,650 from the State of Alaska Department of Health and Social Services. Thank you. This is for the public health preparedness and response to bioterrorism in the HHS. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, this is a public hearing, so come on down. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed.
Move to approve.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. Thank you, Mr. Starr. And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 14M, AR 2014-209, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $608,681 to the State Direct Federal Pass-Through Grant Funds 231 as a Nutrition, Transportation, and Support Services NTS grant when tendered from the State of Alaska. Thank you. This is for transportation services for senior citizens. If you wish to speak to us at this public hearing, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed.
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. Thank you, Mr. Starr. And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 14N, AR 2014-210, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $543,658 to the Public Transportation Capital Improvement Project Fund 485 as an FTA Section 5339 grant when tendered from the U.S. Department of Transportation to purchase transit vehicles and appropriating $10,873 to the public. Thank you. This is this is again for the Public Transportation Department. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, this is a public hearing, so come on down. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed.
Move to approve.
Been moved and seconded. Is there discussion on this matter? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. Thank you, Mr. Starr. Everybody? Ms. Gray Jackson, Mr. Hall, Bueller. And that carries unanimously. That brings us to item 4.
Mr. Chair, was that, it looks like, though, that was recording on number 214-209.
Madam Clerk? That was. Yes, it
That's
was.
correct.
It was, and you are correct, Mr. Evans. We will correct that in a minute.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Mr. Evans, for your attentiveness. That brings us to item 14O, AR 2014-213, a resolution of Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, accepting a State of Alaska municipal matching grant per Senate Bill 119 in the amount of $4 million to be applied toward the Asplund Wastewater Treatment Facility Disinfection Upgrade Project, brought to us by the Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility and the patient, Mr. Jokola. It's accompanied by a Assembly Memorandum 476-2014. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward at this time. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr. And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to the last part of our agenda. We have no special orders. We have no unfinished items. Audience participation is at this time. If you wish to speak to us on a matter that was not previously on the agenda, please come on down and grab your 3 minutes. It's been a while. Welcome back.
Hello.
Please remind us of your name.
Good evening. Thank you for listening to me. I was a cab driver for 34 years. My name is Lynette Marino-Hines, and very political. But tonight I came forward because I talked to the city in regards to the AFM convention, which is here this year, October 23rd, 24th, and 25th, and then it will be here next year, October 15th, 16th, and 17th, which brings in about 4,000 to 5,000 people. This year I worked at the Saturday market, and I made Indian tacos and fried bread. And what my issue is that I think that the current food vendors that are currently doing the AFN, gathering, that I think that it's too limited. And as a food vendor, I would like to know if the city would be able to allow the food vendors with AFN, working with AFN, so that they can set it up and go through all the legal processes. I know time is of the essence here, but if not this year, maybe next year, to provide the attendees and their families with options, and that would include different items food-wise, because currently they can get popcorn, pretzels, soda, donuts, that kind of general thing. So I know it's kind of cold that time of year, but I would really think that this would be very open to the Alaska Native peoples and all the attendees of the Alaska Federation of Natives.
Well, Ms. Marino, if you could kindly write your request down and send it to us, we'll work with the administration to see what might be done.
Thank you. Could you write down my phone number? Although you probably know my voice already. I call the city off and on. My cell number is 301-5435.
Okay, if you could send us a letter or an email, that would be great.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much for coming down. Thank you. Anybody else wish to take their 3 minutes? All right. Seeing and hearing no one, may I have a
Move
motion?
to adjourn.
Any objection? Have a nice evening, everybody. We made it. I told him it's either his budget or his money, but that's it.
Okay.